Hey guys, kinggath here, and welcome to another episode of the kinggath podcast. Today's guest is kind of a mainstay in the Bethesda modding scene. He has done tons and tons of stuff, including my most recent favorite mod, True Storms. Welcome, fadingsignal.
Thank you for having me. Hey, what's going on?
Oh man, it's a good time to be a modder. There's so many cool frameworks, and it's just exciting to be in the Bethesda scene right now.
Tons. It's really great.
It's fantastic. Especially, I feel like ever since the F4 New Vegas team kicked into gear, they keep like throwing us little bones out there, like throwing the
I think it's really cool that they do that. That's something I was just thinking about that yesterday. That a lot of these bigger projects, like I was just looking at which one is it? Skywind, I think. It's been going for I think 4 or 5 years for Skyrim, and there's a bunch of amazing assets that never got released. And I mean, I understand. I guess they had some kind of explicit written permission to only be able to use them for that mod. But
sure,
I love that that some of these people doing this stuff for Fallout 4, they're releasing these little tidbits because it's keeping people excited too. You know, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's like simultaneously it's a marketing effort for them, and then it also helps grow the community in general.
Totally.
Which is really cool for some of these limited skill set things. So like we have a big lack of people who know, for example, Flash and animation. So anytime people can release frameworks to assist with that stuff, or like the Riddler did this big tutorial series on weapons, which I keep bringing up because I'm so blown away by how much detail he put into that. I mean, it's like
That's awesome.
18-hour tutorial series or something.
I love it when people do that. I've always been wanting to make some more tutorials, but as always, time is the enemy, so it's kind of hard to get to it. But
don't I know it? I have so many plans for tutorials that just never threw it.
I can imagine. Yeah, but Riddler's amazing. He's a really cool dude, and his work is awesome. So it's cool. It was really cool to see him put that whole tutorial together.
Yeah, and it covers just about everything. I mean, he's doing everything.
Pretty much.
It's got 3ds Max. It's got a little bit of ZBrush. It's got, I think it's called Marmoset. Does that sound right?
Yes.
For baking. Yeah. Just all sorts of little things it's covering. That it's hard to find that information. Like if you show up to the modding scene, or you like Fallout, and you're like, you know what, I really want to make X. It's really hard to get from point A to point Z. It
really is. There's so much, and I think that's always been the big hurdle for a lot of people getting into modding.
Yeah,
and it was for me too in the beginning. There's that period of time where sheer will has to basically persevere to figure out the barrier for entry and to kind of figure out this stuff. So I think having those kind of resources available really do open up a lot more doors. That I'm excited to see what else comes out, because I was just thinking about it again the other day. As you can tell, modding is on my mind a lot. That even, we're almost 8 years into Skyrim's release, and it's just so much stuff still comes out every day that blows me away, or things that I'm like, wow, how has nobody thought about that in the last, 8 years? So same thing with Fallout. I mean, Sim Settlements obviously was a giant game changer, like literally. And then the things that people have built on top of that, it just keeps expanding. So yeah, it's really cool. I love it.
I can't get enough of it personally. And you've been in it for a hell of a lot longer than I have, because you got your. Did you start before Skyrim? Because I've only known your Skyrim and Fallout stuff. Maybe you worked before that.
No, I'm actually kind of a latecomer. So the short story, I'll give you my little background history into Bethesda games. So for a while, I kind of dropped out of gaming just because I was busy with work and whatever. And I got into Fallout 3. Sometime it was probably about a year after it came out. My friend was like, dude, you got to play Fallout 3. You're going to love it, blah, blah, blah. So this was like 2009 or something. I played that game like crazy. It was on the PlayStation 3, so it was not the best experience, but that's where I fell in love with Bethesda games. I hadn't played Morrowind or any of their previous games yet. So Fallout 3 is what got me hooked.
Okay.
And then when Skyrim came out, same kind of situation where I had bought it and it sat on my shelf. Again, this was for the PS3. And it sat on my shelf because I knew that it was going to be a giant time hole. So I decided that it was probably a good idea for me to wait until I had some free time. So anyway, fast forward to 2014. So the very beginning of 2014 was the very first time I played Skyrim. And I played through it, and I had seen some stuff online about mods, people saying the typical thing like, oh, a mod will fix that or a mod will change that. And I'm like, what's the deal with mods, And I got immediately hooked. I mean, I think the first mod I installed was the auto unequip arrows mod.
Okay.
And I immediately started trying to figure out. I'm sorry, I'm leading into like my whole history of how I got into this
No,
stuff.
people want to hear it, man. That's why I had you on. No, it's very interesting to learn the history of how people get into modding. I especially think it's powerful to motivate people who are on the fence about trying it, because I don't think how that most people realize that all of us are just like regular Joes who just wanted to do it, and we just kind of brute forced our way in. So hearing these stories is super motivating for people who are thinking about it.
Yeah, that's cool. So the gist was basically that, I had a background, and we could talk about that later if you wanted to, but I've always had a background in like digital art and programming and things like that. So I'm also very DIY about everything. So I immediately was thinking, how can I make these things? I don't just want to go download and play with mods. Like I want to make stuff, because I started having ideas right away.
Sure.
I wanted the iron armor to look darker or whatever it was. I started having a million ideas. And so I just started figuring out how to retexture things. And that was, like we were talking about that barrier to entry. I'm like, wow, how do textures even work? What format are they? Prior to that, I had no idea what a DDS file was. So,
right. I'm still
finding
not sure.
out and digging up a lot of old tutorial. At that point, they were pretty old, so tutorials on Skyrim and Morrowind modding. And just, from there, it's the story goes, I just got more and more addicted and just kept digging in and learning more stuff. But so it was early 2014 that I got my start. And then I think my first popular mod was Skysite Skins, which I released in maybe it was August of 2014 or something like that.
Okay.
And that was the one that actually like put my name kind of on the map a little bit. And then
that's the one that's like that's like HD textures for the characters.
Yeah, so that was one thing that I had found in modding, was that there's a giant everything is heavily skewed towards female characters, which makes me sort of laugh when people talk about hardcore role play and then they play as females. It just makes me laugh. But anyway, so there was a lot of really good skin textures for females, but not a lot of good ones for men, or at least not what I wanted to see.
Right.
So that was a good kind of excuse for me to step up my texture game with Skyrim and make something for that. So that was the skin overhaul for men. And then, so that blew up. And then after that was True Storms, which came out a couple of months later. Now, so that's where I got my start.
Okay. I have two questions there now. So for skins and textures, did you have experience doing that for your professional life or just as a hobby to do? Because that's a very particular skill, I feel, to do texturing 3D models. Like that's not something that you would just do in everyday life.
Well, so again, going a little bit more to my background. So, if we want to rewind all the way to the start, we might as well. So when I was a kid growing up, I wanted to make comic books. So I always was, I was drawing all the time and making my own, crappy X-Men comics when I was like 7, 8 years old.
Oh yeah, I got plenty of those.
And that's what I thought. That's what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to grow up and be a comic book artist. But, by the time I was, I think, 13 or 14, my family got a PC, and that was pivotal, as it is for, I think, a lot of people that are around my age. Mm-hmm. So we got a PC, and I started playing around with paint programs and fell in love with that. And so, being a crazy kid, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do comics anymore. Now I want to do digital art.
Sure.
And so I was like, I'm going to be a graphic designer. And so I started learning how to use, we had like Corel Draw and I think one of the very first versions of Photoshop. So I learned how to just, again, that kind of DIY mindset. My mindset was not, oh, I want to be a graphic designer. Maybe after I graduate high school, I'll maybe go to college, and then maybe 5 years later, I'll find a junior. I was like, what? No, I want to do this right now. So I just started digging in. And when I was 15, I started doing an apprenticeship at a print shop that my parents knew somebody that had a really small, it was totally like a little family owned print shop.
Right.
So I started interning there, and it was really low tech, like printing plates and doing negatives and no digital printers, but we did all the artwork digitally. So I learned how to do typesetting and flyer design and business cards and newspapers and all that kind of stuff. So that's, that was where my career, I guess, had begun, was just this kind of after school couple hour internship. And, fast forward, by the time so a couple years later, much like my transition from wanting to do comic books led to graphic design, once I got on the internet, I was like, okay, I don't want to do graphic design anymore. I want to build websites.
Sure.
Because it was, desktop publishing that you could click on, you know what I mean?
Right,
and so that floored me. I was like, this is it. This is the future. This was around 1997.
Okay.
Well, I was like 17. I was still in high school. I'm dating myself here. I'm 39, by the way, if you're curious to do the math.
We would have figured it out eventually.
Yeah. So I got into web development, super hardcore. Started building websites for my friends, my bands, my everything. I was kind of like sort of known amongst my family and my family's friends. I built websites for their businesses and whatever else.
Sure.
Because nobody was doing that at the time. So this was like, it was pretty revolutionary or whatever, if you want to call it that. But
I mean, that's what I did, the same sort of thing, and that's what put my whole career trajectory in place, is because nobody else was doing websites, and I'm just like, I'll figure it out. And like, so then everybody wanted to pay me to make websites. Like, okay, I guess I'm making websites.
Yeah, that was me, and that was exactly what I did. And it was that same thing where, especially then, there was no structure. There wasn't like, okay, you go get a computer science degree and then you go work at a startup in Silicon Valley. Like that, none of that existed. It was just, if you could build a website, anybody wanted to hire you because it was such a rare skill. So when I was 17, I started working at an ISP, and this was in Las Vegas. That's where I was born originally.
Okay.
I started working at an ISP, building websites for all the casinos and the hotels. And in no short time, or any short time, I should say, I was building, like actually, doing back-end coding, like database work, building reservation systems and things like that for a few of the casinos. So we did like Hard Rock Hotel's first website, a bunch of the first websites for a lot of hotels and stuff. So, but when I graduated high school, basically I had the decision of, do I want to basically quit the job that's already my dream job that I want to be doing to go to college to get computer science degree, come back in 4 years and hope that things haven't changed so much, you know what I mean? Or do I just stick it out? And, my family was poor, so we didn't have a lot of money set aside or anything for college or anything. So I didn't really know what my options were. So I was like, I'm just going to duke it out. I'm in the job I want. I'm just going to stick in it and go for it. So,
and you know what? I think most people now would agree that that's the smart way to go, because ultimately most college, there are some college like STEM fields will teach you a skill. So I guess stem cells would teach you something. STEM fields will teach you a skill, but for the most part, when you go to college, it's more about getting yourself that piece of paper that says, hey, I did it.
Yes.
And meeting contacts. But you've already skipped that, met a bunch of contacts, and proved that you can do it. So you don't need the paper, and you have the piece, and you have the people, and you also don't have the debt. So really, that's just, you win.
Sure.
Just pure win.
Now in retrospect, I firmly believe I made the right choice. But for that kind of haunted me for a while, for years. I was like, did I really make the right choice? But
sure.
Let's see, let me jump back again. I'm not trying to ramble on about my entire life story, but all this, it all leads into how I got into modding and why modding has been so important to me. But so, I'd been doing that, and this was, so by 1999, being in Las Vegas in the late 90s was not the most happening technical scene. You know what I mean? There was only a couple of places that were doing web development. There wasn't a lot of, upward track or anything. So, I decided I wanted to move to Southern California because a friend and I had come out a couple of times over the summer just to hang out and go to some shows and whatever. And I'm like, I'm moving to LA. This is where I belong. So I got a job at a startup down in Orange County in Newport Beach in '99, and that's what brought me out to California. So in fact, it was exactly 20 years ago this month. So. Anyway, fast forwarding over the next few years, I worked at different startups, as a web developer and a web designer. And during that time, to answer your original question, if I had done this kind of stuff previously, so, in addition to building websites and doing, layout design, I've always done album art and various other things, and have incorporated some little elements of 3D and whatnot. So I only dabbled in 3D a little bit as far as, like making 3D text or 3D elements to use in different artwork or web design, but never really went full blown into it. And then, jumping forward back into the modding thing, the first time I textured a 3D model from scratch, I think was, I'm actually going to open the Nexus because I want to see. I'm curious now what my very first mod was. Hold on a second.
I might already have that up here because I have all your mods up on my screen right now.
Oh, really? Cool.
The oldest one, it looks like 2014 May was the first one I'm seeing.
There we go. It was the moons. It was the moons. That's right. So this one wasn't a 3D texture because those are just planes they're flat planes. But so that one was a lot of, just hand painting shadows and stuff. I got some pictures of Mars and I think, I don't remember, was it Enceladus, I think is the second one. Anyway, so the first actual 3D model that I textured was the smelter, I guess. So yeah, I hadn't had a lot of background in doing that. So, and I wasn't, using, I don't think the best tools at the time either. I was just using Photoshop. So
there weren't a ton of options in like.
No, there really weren't. Like some of I think Substance Painter might have been around by then, but it was an early version, and that's I wasn't ready to start spending money on this stuff yet.
Sure.
So yeah, it was a lot of trial and error. Like when I made those skins, those male skins, that was it was a couple of months of work, like here and there, and lots. I mean, going back, there's still seams and stuff that I wish I would have been able to fix, but without a 3D painting program, it was kind of just trial and error, save, load up, try to fix, paint it, see if it works again. But anyway.
Oh yeah. And you probably, because you aren't editing the UVs even that you could force it to work. You just have to, Oh man.
Yeah. So there's still some ugly parts in there, but we'll just forget about those. Anyway,
you cover those up with the appropriate clothing mods.
Yes. Perfect.
Well, that was a very thorough answer. I appreciate that. It's very I find it a very tough skill set to pick up of doing texture art. So
sure, and I think something I failed to mention too is that I've done a lot of photography work and a lot of photo editing. So the combination of using Photoshop since the mid 90s with photo editing and just general design and everything, it ends up being a different canvas. You have to think about it a different way because it's a 3D object and it reacts differently to different light and stuff. But at the end of the day, a lot of the skills transferred over. So that was cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Especially if you were feeling the urge to get pulled in and make content for Skyrim. Textures are a huge deal. And it's one of those ones, textures are one of those ones where I'm only coming around to recently. I tended to avoid them because they seemed to me they were just kind of a bloat. It was like, all right, you're going to put a bunch of extra weight on my graphics card.
That's actually smart. That's really smart because I think that's the first thing that people jump to. That was the first thing I did.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people unnecessarily bloat their game with textures that they're never going to notice. And so they're like, I installed this 8K pillow normal map and it looks amazing, but why is my game stuttery now? I'm like, well, your VRAM is going to, your video card's sweating, buddy.
Well, not only that, but the engine itself only seems to be able to handle so much, and then it can start to choke up. I've seen this especially with Fallout 4, that after you hit it doesn't matter how good your system is, the engine has its own limitations. I don't understand the underpinnings, and I don't think we ever will, because I'm sure Bethesda's going to keep that close to the chest. But it does seem like there are certain points when you put too much stuff in, you're just going to cause crashes. And so I've just avoided them for the most part. But somebody finally convinced me to install a texture overhaul that was just 2K textures, and it hit some of the core stuff and kept it all within the theme of the game. So it's not trying to make it ultra realistic or anything. It was like, or adding a little more rust or a little higher detail, but otherwise it fits the art style, and I really like them. And now I'm seeking out more like that, because that when it all fits together, that's great. But I don't even think, even with Skyrim or any of the older games, that there's any one person who has done a total overhaul, which is kind of what you would need to make sure that there was a common style across them to have a consistent style, right? So you end up with like these patchworks of textures I see people using, and it can look good in some spots, and other places it looks kind of wonky.
It's real easy to make the game look bad. So that's something that's important to note. I always try to tell people you got to go for quality over quantity, and so finally people stopped just jumping at everything being 4K. Like nothing should be 4K unless it's like the size of a vertibird. You know what I mean?
Right. The 4K
and there's
pillow,
a few
not
like
necessary.
Yeah, not necessary. Or one of the worst offenders was for a while I saw a lot of weapon mods where every piece of the gun was 4K. So all added together, it was like 17 different textures all at 4K. So the weapon was like a 1 gigabyte of VRAM just to like for one weapon. I'm like, oh my God, dude, that's not how you do it. But
I mean, I guess if it's on your first person model, maybe just because that's the one thing you have to look at constantly, but
sure. But yeah, I mean, the trigger itself doesn't need to be 4K. I mean, come on, that's like a tiny thing. It's like the size of a bottle cap, and
it only flashes on screen during your reload animation.
Exactly. But the quality over quantity is a big thing. So quick shout out for Fallout 4, Flaken Oil. I'm not saying it with the proper French accent, I know, but he made this retexture project that's I don't know if you've seen it, but
I think that's the only one I'm using. I'm looking through my list right now. I have
incredible.
I think that's the one I'm using that somebody convinced, because I made so I started a Let's Play, and the idea of it was I need to get myself back in the game so that I'm developing for an audience. I understand who I'm developing for once again, because it'd been so long, and I decided let's get some mod suggestions from the community, and I had put in my suggestions like the types of mods I tend to like, and I said I hate texture mods. I'm never using texture mods. They're a waste of space. And I was like, but I'm open to being convinced, and I'm pretty sure Flaken Oil is the one. That sounds really familiar. I'm
this is, and it's probably the most comprehensive. But yeah, this guy, like everything that I'm looking at it now, and I still can't believe like how almost exact he made them look to the base game. Like he put a lot of care into it, because that's something I don't really care for when people go, well, I put my own kind of feel into it, or they change the colors. Right. Like I really like the game to feel the way that the developers intended, especially because, as you said before, there's that cohesiveness that you want to keep.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
When it's like, oh wow, all the walls are bright blue now, they're 4K, but they totally don't match anymore. But anyway, if for listeners out there, if they haven't checked out that pack, it's fantastic, because you can have the same texture resolution and have a supremely higher quality texture. It's just because, if the original art that was used at that resolution was, just painted kind of quick or just wasn't as sharp as it could have been. Because, when there's 50,000 textures in a game, they're not going to spend 5 hours on one floor tile. So, So yeah, go 2K. Anyway.
Yeah, it seems to me like his texture pack, he took the time to make sure that they all had proper normal and spec maps, and they he just fleshed them out a little bit, so they all have the exact same coloration. There are color palettes, and great texture pack. This is the one I'm using. That's exactly the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, so it's fantastic.
So that has got me now open to the idea of like I should look into some more, but I'm always remembering what I've seen other people's games look like on YouTube and such, where they've just installed every pack that comes out. It's like, okay, I don't want to go that route because it can get ugly fast.
No, definitely not. I feel the same way about like ENBs and weather mods and everything too. Like it's really easy to jack up your game and make it look like crap, so.
Right. Just installing a bunch of things with 4K in the name is not necessarily for the win. But
exactly.
So then True Storms being your other super well-known mod. Well, you've got a lot of well-known ones, but that one I think is.
Thank you.
I think that one is one where everybody just
That's
associates
the most
with
famous
you.
One, right?
Because as soon as it came out, I mean, for Skyrim it's huge, and then as soon as it hit for Fallout, people went crazy for it. It was one of those ones. I believe I downloaded when it first came out, but I tend to play Bethesda. I think I do a pattern a lot of people do with Bethesda games. I play the crap out of the game at first, then I wait for the DLC, and then I come back and play it again. And that's pretty much what I did, but I didn't touch a lot of mods during that time. I waited until after the CK came out, and since the CK was so delayed, it was like I almost missed a lot of the mods. And with True Storms, I just installed it about 2-3 months ago, and it is fantastic, just amazing.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you like it.
So that is an entirely Foley is an incredibly specialized skill set. So where did you find, like, how much of that is sound you collected? How much of it is like libraries you used? How did you put that together? Because that seems like a mod I wouldn't even know where to begin with.
So this, again, none of this is me trying to boast or anything at all. But another thing that I'm involved heavily in is just audio and music. I write music. I've written music for most of my life. You can check me out on Spotify if you search up Vogel, V like Victor, Ogel, my last name. Okay. So I go by Vogel, I write music. So I've always done audio engineering and stuff as a hobby, in addition to the million other things that I always do. But so sound effects are something that I'm always super aware of. And once I started getting in Skyrim, when I started modding every little thing, when you start paying a lot of attention to little things, you start finding all the things that you want to change, right? So sound effects, I downloaded some of the compendiums of sound effects, and there was a lot of really good changes. But I noticed that even a lot of the weather mods just didn't really change the sounds to be how I wanted. And the base game thunder sounds are pretty subtle, which makes sense because you don't want to override dialogue or whatever. But I was like, I really want some intense storms. Like, I think I'm just gonna make some new sounds. So that was how it was born. Was originally I just wanted some new thunder sounds.
Sure.
And so I have, just gigs and gigs and gigs of sound libraries that I've purchased over the years and whatnot that have a lot of kind of kit pieces for like natural sounds and explosions and weathers and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And so I ended up making a lot of those sounds as a hybrid between, there's some gunshots for some crackles. There's a bunch of actual just thunder sounds from these royalty-free libraries. There are a few sounds from freesounds.org that I might not have properly credited because I don't remember where I grabbed, who I grabbed them from. So shout out to anyone whose random lightning sounds from Nebraska I used, So yeah, that was a combo of all that stuff. And then I went through and, EQ'd them all to try to feel like they were in the same space, so that they didn't sound like random different mixed sounds.
Right.
And so it was my audio engineering and music background that kind of lent itself to making sounds for that. So, and then once I made the sounds, I was like, you know what? Now that I've got these crazy thunder sounds, the rain just does not look right and sound right compared to these. So I was like, It looks like I'm making some rain sounds, which are a lot easier to make because there's so many resources, free resources and sound library resources. It was easy to kind of mix and match and make what I wanted. So
then you had to piece it all together and add the appropriate everything. So now a lot of the environmental effects, that's all engine handled with just settings, right? Or did you have to actually do a bunch of art for that?
So I made new textures for the raindrops and the snow. But pretty much it's funny because for as much as, True Storms, is probably my biggest mod, it's probably the simplest out of all of them because it replaces some sounds, but it adds the way that the lightning worked without going into too much detail. The engine did have a tendency to repeat itself with whatever sound it picked. So if you've got a sound, you can add multiple wave files to a single sound so that every time it triggers, it's a little bit different. So, the same sword whacking sound isn't the exact same every time.
Yeah.
But for some reason in Skyrim, when the weather would load a storm and it would load in a sound into memory, whichever sound that it loaded into memory first is the one that it held onto. So the thunder was the same exact sound every single time.
Interesting. How do you fix something like that?
Well, I tried all kinds of things. It was funny because the first phase of trying to fix that was I replaced all the thunder sounds with me saying 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, just so that I could hear which sound. Creative
so debugging techniques.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so I was like, well, there are multiple. Well, what am I trying to say? In the weather record itself, again, I'm trying not to get too technical, but here we go. Right. In the weather record itself, you can specify a thunder sound. But you can specify multiple sounds of either wind or thunder or rain. So you can add as many thunder sounds as you want. And so what I did was added something like 15 thunder sounds all at once.
Okay.
But then I gave them all a reduced chance with a condition in the sound record itself.
Okay.
So they don't all fire at the same time. So that basically offset having 15 thunder sounds at once. So when it triggers, basically the chance of any one of these 15 sounds triggering is random enough to where you get a whole smattering of different sounds. And sometimes they'll trigger together, which adds to that randomness. So that was kind of how I tackled that.
That's almost the exact same solution we came up with for the soundscape from Sim Settlements. does something very similar, just using just let it random roll a number, and if it's less than whatever, it does it. Yeah,
conditions are super powerful.
Oh my god, are they? Every time I look through the condition list, I'm like, why don't we have these all as Papyrus functions? I could do god tier things with all those. There's so many good stuff, so many good things in that list.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff.
There is, for those of listening who don't know what we're talking about, essentially the CK has the ability to do way more than we can do with scripting, and it's pretty mind-boggling, all the stuff that you can check for, and like anything you can think of.
And it's good practice to try to do what you can with that stuff first before you rely on script, just because things like conditions and quest aliases and story manager events are all handled at the engine level by like separate processes than the Papyrus engine and everything. So if you do some stuff, and again, there's always different cases, but if you can solve something by just using a condition, that's always going to be the higher performance.
Especially on Skyrim, it's noticeably different. Like Fallout's got a pretty robust scripting engine, although it does have issues that, unlike Skyrim, the Fallout version seems to be very capable of crashing the game. Like you get X number of simultaneous threads and it's over. But I
was going to say, if anyone is familiar with that, it's you. Pushing it to new limits.
Yeah, we've broken the game many a times and had to roll back our ideas, but we're going to keep going. I think that's one of the fun. Cool. That's a very fun part about developing for this community, is the fact that there's enough people committed to the idea of pushing these games to like the ultimate immersive experience. So you've got people like the Xedit team and the F4SC guys, and just the random people who are doing the work like you talked about at the beginning, like Nyanko, who puts out all these amazing frameworks for the UI and stuff. Like all these people working together to try and make sure that we have no limits, so that we can build like this amazing, insane experience. And it seems like nobody's going to be giving up anytime soon, because we just saw that, I don't know how many of you watched the 25th anniversary little panel they did at PAX, and they were basically saying, don't get your hopes up. It's going to be many a year before you see Elder Scrolls 6. So we have many more years to look forward to Skyrim stuff, I think.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's something that I've noticed. I mean, compared to other games, you can't even compare it to other games. I mean, sure, Gary's mod is like, kind of the original sort of, I wouldn't even say the original, but one of the biggest kind of modding platforms that became its own thing. But yeah, like the modding community with Bethesda games is just, it's bonkers.
It really is.
And, and I got swept up in it myself, so I completely understand. Yeah, it's really, really awesome. I can't wait to see what else people come up with. I'm really hoping that some of these bigger DLC-sized things actually see the light of day. I mean, I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of work that can be involved in those, but at the same time, building on the previous lessons of what not to do, I am very hopeful that some of the stuff like Fallout Miami and Cascadia and all those are all coming along really well. I can't wait to see what they do.
Yeah, it's always tough to see that. So I was really into the Quake 3 modding scene back in the day, and every other day somebody would start up this Overhaul project of like they were going to totally transform the game, and I got swept up into several of them, and so many of them would fail.
Sure.
That my experience with those mega projects is 80 to 90% of them never see the light of day, which is really sad to see. And I don't think that has changed in today's timeline.
Right.
I think you see a lot of announced projects for Morrowind or Oblivion, which just kind of disappeared after they got super ambitious and whatnot. But I feel like there's a lot more of a spotlight on things when they do succeed, so that probably gives some hope to the other projects that are still going. So when you see
I hope so.
Beyond Skyrim able to release Bruma, and you see Project Brazil transform into New California and get a release date, or the Enderial turn into its own launcher, like that stuff it's got to be so motivating for all these teams.
Yeah, that's really cool. Enderal was something that I haven't played it yet, but it's on my list to get to at some point. But I've followed that and watched a lot of videos on it and stuff. That's super impressive to me. And it's really cool that they got their own, part of the launcher and everything. That's really cool. That's great. These people, even if a lot of these things don't see the light of day, so many of these people are learning a ton, and these are kind of like resume portfolio pieces anyway. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think anybody is really wasting their time working on those projects. And then I think the people who are managing them, and if they fail, they're learning a valuable, invaluable life lesson you couldn't have learned anywhere else
Oh, yeah.
that wouldn't have cost you your livelihood. Like those types of
Yeah.
failures are great to do in these kinds of projects. So if you're,
Yes.
because you got to learn, you learn through failure, and if you go fail leading a game project at a company, you're going to get shit canned. So
yeah. So
much
yeah,
better
better
to
to
learn it
do
here.
it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's something that's pretty cool about all this is there have been a number of people, that have, I think, what was the name of the one? The Forgotten City, that mod for Skyrim that actually became its own game.
Yeah, that's nuts.
That's coming
so
out soon.
awesome.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And that, that was the artist, so I'll call him the artist or the writer or whatever you want to call it, that put that together originally. I believe that was their goal. They were basically like, they wanted to make a game. And so they decided to make it as a mod first and kind of go through all that to where when they, actually had a studio behind them, that they kind of knew the pitfalls. So yeah, it's really smart. It's a really good way to like you said, fail properly and without a lot of risk. So I don't want to discourage people.
Right. I want to encourage people. In fact, so far, every time one of these big projects is coming out, I've been sending a big giant donation their way to just as like a congratulations, because it's so impressive to see these happening. So yeah, it would be really awesome to see some more of these come through. And you've seen some from Skyrim pop up, or just every once in a while you just get this monster DLC size mod, and it makes sense that it would take that long, because if you figure that the majority of these people are doing this either, I know there are some number of people who aren't employed or whatever, or live in a country where they have a good social safety net and they can do this way more than most people, but I think the average person is putting in this time after a day job or after their college classes. So to build a DLC, like it takes Bethesda, we know from what they've told us many times, something like Skyrim or Fallout 4, it'll take them 3 to 5 years, a team of 100 some people, probably working 60 hours a week each. Like, and they're professionals.
And and that's just the team that we know of. I mean, if there's like additional people that they bring in or whatever, who knows? I mean, it's a lot of work making a game. So so to make these DLCs, it's pretty impressive. Like some of the I'm trying to think of some of my other favorite ones that have come out. There's been a handful, and like I said, I've seen the kind of building on the success and failures of the previous ones. I've noticed that some people the ones that are more successful tend to be a little more quiet. Like they'll wait until they've got something kind of not close to being done that they can show off, instead of announcing this giant overhaul before they've even got anything on paper,
I'm in that category. I prefer to do that. I like to do the release within a few weeks after we announce. I think that's I think it's better for everybody. Best. I think it's more fun as a player because you don't have to wait. And as the developer, you don't give them too much time to develop that hype train to where their expectations exceed anything you can possibly do. Right.
Exactly.
So
at this point.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say at this point, some of these projects like Skywind and stuff, if they don't deliver on the level of hype that people, and not even them, like that people around them and gaming press and stuff have built up, if it's not going to be, bug free and whatever else, they're going to, be like, oh, that was a big disappointment, even if it's amazing,
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that goes that route, but it's but at the same time, when you want to take on a project like that, you need a lot of help, and that hype can get people to volunteer to help. I mean, that's definitely, I would not have tried half the stuff I did if I wasn't so fortunate to have Sim Settlements take off. There's no way I would have done some of the stuff that we followed up with. The only reason I was able to do that was because enough people excited about the initial launch volunteered to assist me so that we could do even cooler stuff. And so like if you're starting out and maybe you have some of the people who started out those mods like Skywind or Sky Oblivion, I mean, you can't just start that. I guess you can kind of start it by yourself. Maybe you import the terrain data and you start building things, but at some point, if you're tackling that for real, you need a boatload of help.
You need
disciplines,
help. And you need to be able to manage those people too and keep all that stuff in line. And not like with, just to track everything. And like in your case, you being, having, if I recall, a lot of your own businesses and stuff, you've dealt with managing people and things like that. So having a team of people aboard, it sounds like you know how to keep everything organized and keep everything moving.
I feel like a terrible manager. I'm still learning every day. This is, it's such a different beast to manage people who are volunteering their time versus managing employees.
Right.
Because you don't have the stick to go with the carrot.
Sure.
There's no threat of, I guess there's the threat of firing if they get removed from the team, but it's, at the end of the day, you're asking people to do you a favor.
Right.
So it's a much different animal, but it's a lot of fun, especially when things are meshing and coming together. The camaraderie is fantastic, and being able to celebrate those launches with a big group instead of, it's just like I go tell my wife about it and she's like, oh, that's great, honey. Like she has no not a gamer in any way, so it's
sure,
like she's happy to see when she sees the download numbers. She's always like, okay, that's kind of a real amount of people, but beyond that is like, I don't know what you're doing, I don't understand.
That's hilarious. Yeah. To kind of, I guess, flip the script a little bit. I don't know if I'm sure you've covered this in other podcasts and stuff, but what made you start on Sim Settlements, and kind of how did you start that? I'm just curious myself.
Yeah. So like I had said earlier about how I play the Bethesda games, I tend to play through them once completely unmodded, and then I put them away for a few months, and I like to play all the DLC at once rather than playing each one piecemeal. Because for me, when I close out a character for a while and I come back, I don't want to pick up where I left off because I don't remember what I was doing with my character.
Sure.
I don't remember the perks I chose or whatever, even though, especially like in Fallout 4, it becomes kind of homogenous. There was something about, I always remember the most positive, the startup of a new character, that blank palette you get to shape into something cooler. So I always wanted to do that, but I'm like, I'm not going to do that 6 times. I'm not going to do that for not in the span they released the DLC. Like I will definitely play.
Sure,
I've played, a dozen characters on Skyrim and several in Fallout 4, but I'm not going to do 6 new characters in the 6 months it takes them to get all the DLC. So I like to wait for all of it. So I did that. I started playing my DLC playthrough, and I built up. When I went in, I was like, I'm going to do every single settlement, high detail. I downloaded all the like OC Decorator and whatever all the stuff that makes up Creative Clutter now that used to be individual mods. I like grabbed all of that type of things, and I went all out on Sanctuary. I had this insane Sanctuary built out to the nines. It was crazy, and I just stepped back, looked at it, and like, okay, now I got to do that 35 more times. Like, there's no way in hell. And so then I just loaded up the CK and had at it and just started going.
That's awesome.
I had fortunately learned a lot of the CK techniques from dinking around with Skyrim. I was one of those people that did mods for myself and my buddies and would not release them publicly. And then I did for Fallout 4, I put out salvage beacons, and that had enough of a draw. Like people were impressed with that enough, and it got featured. Sure. So I was like, oh, people like what I'm doing. That's cool. Like that's exciting. Maybe I'll try and do another mod that I take seriously, where I make sure it's got all the bells and whistles. And
that's awesome. That's really cool.
What's funny about Sim Settlements is when I had it in a functional state, so I finally got it to a point where it would actually do its thing, and it was very simple at first. It was basically I had a house that would build. It would go through. The seller would walk up and they would build a house, and I showed that to somebody, and they just lost their mind. Somebody else in the modding community, and they're like, "You have no idea how amazing that is." I'm like, "Really? It wasn't that difficult." All right, I'll keep developing this, and then I got it to the point. Kind of like the 1.0 release, except I don't think I had the shops in it at first. It was just like you could build a farm or a scrapyard or a bunch of different houses. And I gave it to a few people to alpha test, and they're like, "This is going to be one of the biggest mods ever." I'm like, "Really? I don't think so."
Yeah, because I remember even getting a lot of people were like, "Why do I got to build everything? I'm the Minuteman. Should I have to be the one building all this stuff for these ungrateful settlers and blah blah?" So, yeah, when that came out, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's going to the top." That's and it did,
It's
congrats on all that, by the way. It's
thank you.
Definitely amazing.
I feel like I cheated to the top in that regard, because like I don't feel like the mod in particular does anything special. It was just a matter of I was the first one to put the time in to do it. The idea is, I don't think the idea is particularly unique or anything. I essentially took the mechanics from SimCity, and I was like, all right, how would these work in first person? And that's
sure. But everything, you can break everything down that way. I mean,
sure.
You can say, oh, I'm not the first person to arrange those notes in that order or whatever, but you still did it, and you did it in the right time, and delivered it the right way, and polished it and supported it the right way. And those are all the things that add together to make any product, whether it's a mod or a product, successful. So you did all the things right.
I mean, I agree with that, and I tell most people that it's just do things, because there are a shocking number of people who don't have the discipline or commitment to follow through on things.
Yes. That
or
is
did I say that wrong?
true.
There are a shocking number of people who will. So, or shocking. I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. There's very few people who will commit to things and follow through on them.
Yes, correct.
So when you're one of those, you can often have just success because you were willing to put in the hours.
Right, because finished. What I'm trying to remember who said it. I think it was like Quincy Jones or somebody basically said like finished is better than perfect.
Yes.
You know.
Absolutely.
And I think some people, they're like, oh, I'm going to release this when I feel like it's ready, which, that's fine because it's your project. You can do what you want. But there is a point where you kind of have to say, all right, this is good enough, or this isn't a good enough state or whatever to release it. And just, again, it's just that finishing because people have to, this has happened with me. I've started, if I have a spreadsheet that's got like probably 200 ideas that I either started or got halfway through or I got bored with it or whatever. Like you have to factor in your own motivation over time can just be stifled or lose interest or whatever. So finishers are good.
Yeah. Another one I heard from this, I heard it in a game, GD, what is it? What's the Game Developers Conference? GDC talk.
GDC,
somebody said, they titled their thing Real Artist Chip. And I was like, that is so true. It does, because you can call yourself an artist all you want, but if you never show anybody anything, are you an artist?
That is very true. Got to ship it. Got to ship it, and got to get it out in the world.
Yeah,
and that's something that I think ends up being, when people put a lot, and not to open the Pandora's box about criticism of game companies, because it is, there's a lot of
plenty to
conflicting opinions and stuff, plenty to criticize, but. At the same time, there's the thing that I think a lot of people, and once you started making mods, I think when I started making mods, it really changed my perspective on the amount of work involved with, releasing a game and whatnot. And especially when I went to look at, there was one point I wanted to see how much texture coverage I had in Skyrim, like just to see how many textures I was replacing and how many textures didn't have a, high definition replacement.
Right.
And I made a post about it, but it was something like, this is just off the top of my head, so I don't remember if it's exact numbers, but comparing every major texture pack and all of the handpicked ones at the time, this was sometime in like 2015, it still only comprised of something like 14% coverage of all of the textures in Skyrim. And that was with like 70 gigabytes of textures or some insane amount. And I posted that and everybody's like, no, that can't be right. That can't be right. I don't believe it. And then they did they did the comparison themselves and they're like, holy crap, that's true. Because there's so much, there's little, sure, if you get all the big stuff, that 14% or whatever it was covered all the farmhouses and all the big things that you see a lot. But, when you think about how long would it take a team of 10 or 15 artists to make literally like 21,000 textures? I mean, think about that. It's bonkers.
Right.
So those kinds of things really opened my eyes to, okay, if every single texture was going to be zoomed in on and focused and refined to the level that a modder would, this game, like Skyrim, would have taken 17 years just to finish the textures,
Right.
So there is a line where they got to just be like, we got to ship it. Who cares if it's blurry? It doesn't affect the game. They just get it out. Right. Nobody's going to zoom in on the tongs and go, wow, those could be 4K, so.
Yeah, definitely. It can definitely give slack for that. I think the current, one of the bigger criticisms now is how many games ship with leaning on patches as a crutch for actual game breaking bugs.
Yes.
Whereas they couldn't have done that in the day of hard media. And that's.
Yeah. And I think that's a problem in general with technology overall, with every single kind of hardware object now has firmware updates.
Right.
You hear, I remember when I bought my AV receiver for my home theater, it was like on arrival, it had these bugs that were like, just ports didn't work. I'm like, how is that acceptable to ship? And they're like, oh, it's fixed in version whatever of the firmware. I'm like, no, that it should not have left the factory. Like that's right. A little bit ridiculous. So, I blame, there's multiple factors in that of, rushing to market. Everybody's trying to get out first.
Right.
To meet kind of player expectations and everything. But it's a vicious circle, where they keep doing, if everybody's one-upping each other and all the consumers are expecting things to be bigger and louder and better and faster, it's a vicious cycle. But yeah, I totally agree. The whole thing of like leaning on patches is kind of crappy.
I mean, I as a software developer, I understand exactly why it happens, and it's because what we tend to do is we will focus on the 90%. We will look at the 90% of features we anticipate people using, and we will rigorously test that, and we leave the 10% of fringe cases because those 10% don't tend to add up to 10% of the work. They end up being more like 80% of the work if you focus on them.
Yeah.
Because it's so many little corner case things, and it gets way worse in video games. So with software, it's especially like I do a lot of websites now, and it's a lot easier to control for those by just setting up circumstances where it's like, all right, if this weird combination of things is tried, we just put a hard no. We just give them an error message. You can't do that in a video game. Like,
right. You can't just be like, oh, yeah, you've got the infamous you can't walk that way type message on the edge of the map, but you can't do that in mid play. Like, you can't shoot that guy. Like, what are you talking about?
So they're just way more intricate systems. But even something like hardware, like your sound system stuff, they probably test the first, they'll if it's got 6 sets of RCA on it and 4 HDMI, they'll test the first handful and make sure they work, and then maybe the auxiliary ports they ignore and in their testing cycle to save money, because it's if you've got to cycle through thousands of units and you figure out the money, and it's like, all right, I got to pay them X amount of minutes of work to test it all. If I shave this off, I can get 30 more units tested an hour, blah blah blah, and it
totally
just
There's
can see
so many things that factor in. Many things that factor in. But yeah, I kind of wish.
It would be nice to see stuff ship out the door bug free. I don't anticipate that ever being a thing. I think this is just the way we live forever now.
Yes. The days of having things like on a CD-ROM all self-contained and perfect are long gone.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably have them if you tightened the games back up. So if you could probably have an indie title that released that way, because the feature set is going to be substantially smaller. But
yeah, that's something I think if we want to kind of go on that topic of indie games, I've been keeping a pretty sharp eye on indie games for a while, and something that's actually a specific thing that I found very interesting about it is that, jumping back to what I said about the kind of vicious cycle where, games are trying to outdo each other and get bigger and better, and this one's even more open world, and this one's even bigger and louder and more stuff, and then you have something like, if you remember, like when Angry Birds, I'm like going back a decade, but like when Angry Birds was like the number one, monster game in the App Store, it had like, it was like, just leaps beyond even the second place app. Right. And then one guy made a game called Tiny Wings. There was just this little game, and I think it's still up, and it's really fun if you haven't played it, but I still have it on my phone after all these years. Anyway, one dude knocked Angry Birds out of the top spot, and I was like,
are you talking about Flappy Bird, the one where you got to go between the pipes?
No, this one's called Tiny Wings, and it's like it's a momentum based game where you when you press on the screen, that kind of makes the bird dive bomb, and he slides on these hills.
No, I've never played this. Okay,
it's so fun. Like the sound, the graphics, everything is just so addictive. But there's one gameplay mechanic, and it's literally just trying to move as fast as you can by sliding down these little hills as this bird who has these tiny wings so he can't fly on his own. Huh. But my point is that, he knocked out this monolith with his own, and it was a team of one. And seeing that with Nintendo, that's always been something that's been a cornerstone, in my opinion, of gaming, is that they will take fun over scale and quality. Like their games some of them still look kind of like they almost would be on the N64, but they're so damn fun, and the game mechanics are so good that people are like, who cares? It's just, I want to get in there and play it. So there's something to be said for that kind of refinement of the gameplay. You know what I mean? So with indie games being so simple, I do think there could be a return, a trend where games, instead of doing the quantity over quality, that hopefully they start going back the other way and just tighten up the game, make it a little smaller than the last one, but make it much better. Make that map smaller but more dense, or just better designed or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the hope anyway.
Well, I think then once they can tighten up those, what I see starting to happen in the industry, and I think this is going to be an amazing thing for us consumers, is that the most things are becoming standardized. The formula for open
Yeah.
world is becoming standardized. The idea that you have tech trees is becoming standardized. The art assets are becoming standardized.
Yes.
There are a certain set of, do you want to be photorealistic? Do you want to be, cell shaded? Like there are certain sets of art, and then there's certain genres. So you've got like the post-apocalyptic genre, and you've got certain variations in the past and present day stuff and present future
survival modes and this and that. Yeah.
Right. Like everything's becoming standard to where a lot of it, I think, can start getting kitted and reused, and then we'll be able to have games at scale where the story can, or the focus can be on story, tightening up gameplay and eliminating bugs, and that you can start seeing like those.
Yeah, I think that's really where I feel like it's going to. We saw that happen. I don't know how long you've been a web developer, but we saw that happen with the web. Like back in like 2007, I started working at MySpace, and I worked there for about 7.5 years. That was like my longest tenure. And when I started there, we didn't have out-of-the-box caching systems to serve 200 million concurrent users. Like we had to build crazy ghetto stuff in some places just to prop up, databases to be able to serve that much. And over time, I mean, now you can easily, with like Amazon Web Services and a couple things out of the box, you can build a website or an iOS app that can scale to 100 million users without breaking a sweat, with stuff right out of the box.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is amazing. So like you said, it lets you focus on what the app does instead of how is this going to scale, and having to waste all that thought process. So having that happen with games is awesome.
Yeah, it really is. It is going to, I think the people who suffer are going to be some of the people who went in to do creative work. I think it's going to end up costing a lot of jobs in like the texture department. I think that at some point you don't need to have, 20 guys doing environmental art anymore. And that's
those shifts are definitely happening already with things like photogrammetry. That's a huge thing. A lot of people are moving over to that. I don't know if you're familiar with a lot of that.
Bethesda just said they were getting into it. They showed some little pictures of stuff for TES 6 during the 25th anniversary thing that they're doing. What is it called? I can never say the word.
Photogrammetry.
Photogrammetry. Thank you. Yeah, they're doing that for TES 6 and Starfield. So,
I didn't see that. I need to go watch that video. But I mean, everyone's moving toward that because, like you said, it's once you get a standardized, streamlined way to just go take a picture of a coastline and then have it in the game with incredible textures and resolution and everything, it's like, why am I, you're not going to waste a bunch of time on some original art unless you need like a specific art style. But for the realism, there's a lot of those kinds of things that are taken over. So yeah, it's important for, as with any career path, for people to stay on their toes and advance their skills.
Right. Well, I think it'll be interesting to see where that all goes in that regard with the human capital, because that's going to be a problem across the board. If we wanted to get into even outside of just software, it's going to become a problem for
automation and everything.
Automation is going crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But the AI applied then to the telegrammetry, I think whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Photogrammetry.
Photogrammetry. Thank you. The AI applied to that, you could even give it a new art style. So they've already shown there are AIs that can they can take a series of photos and convert them all to look cell shaded or to make it look like it's Van Gogh's work.
Versa. There was that. I think it wasn't NVIDIA. I think somebody just did some demo where somebody was drawing with their finger.
Okay.
And they were drawing like a very rudimentary, like a pond with some mountains in the background, and an AI was converting that into photorealistic image in real time next to what they were doing.
That's nuts.
So they basically said, I'm going to draw water, and they drew a body of water, and then the AI filled in the details with actual water generated from like thousands of photos that it had stored. And it was like, it was mind blowing. So of course it's, in the demo phase, but yeah, if you translate to like gaming, I mean, God, you could go so far as having a drone go take a whole aerial scan of New York City and then have an AI cell shade it, and that, you know what I mean? Like you could go bonkers and just be like, okay, one dude just like turned all of New York City into like a cell shaded game area. Like, whoa.
Right. That to me, what I see happening soon, if we're not already in the middle of it with all of the indie games, is with the powers of AI and all these new technologies like that, I see something like the equivalent of YouTube happening to the gaming world, of where you're going to allow individuals to take over as the best content creators for at least for a short time, where you could have somebody create. Because right now we've got like Fortnite's kind of the king of gaming, with Apex knocking it down for a while. We don't know if that's going to be a flash in the pan, or if that's going to be a long-term sustainable thing, or if that's only riding on the popularity of itself because of I guess they've marketed and paid a lot of streamers to make it their priority. But anyway,
sure.
Some random person could do what did you call it? What was that game called? Tiny Bird? Some random person,
tiny wings,
could take the Tiny Wings idea of like perfecting a gameplay concept, and then using all of these automation tools to generate a game that's as comprehensive as some of these ones we like to play. And then you just got one guy just totally shaking up the game industry. And
oh yeah, I mean, we've seen that with literally every industry so far. I mean, with music, aside from just the internet, when people were complaining about Napster killing the music industry, whatever, and being cronies and not accepting change, that was only the beginning. I mean, it really wasn't about just Napster. It was about there suddenly being a channel for an individual to reach the masses on their own without needing to involve a big company or whatever in between.
Right.
So that's when you started seeing the rise of, MySpace broke a bunch of bands like The Killers and whatever else got big on MySpace, and that kind of blew them up. And so with YouTube, same kind of thing. So yeah, any kind of content that can be digitized, I definitely see that being the case. I think indie games, tying it all back to that, what we talked about a few minutes ago with things becoming more standardized, like in the Unreal Engine 4, so many of the assets that you can go and buy from there, or not even just buy from there, but there's independent artists that work in that engine and know exactly what to make. My point is, you can get a lot of assets together in a relatively inexpensive and quick way to build something already that's pretty great looking and that functions well. And that there's a lot of, sure, you're going to be using some of the same animations or whatever that other games do, but there's a lot of stuff there that empowers people to build their own stuff already. So we're already seeing that shift happen a lot. So that would be great. I mean, if it ended up that so many indie games came out that just kind of blew some of the AAA games out of the water and made them rethink their strategy, just like, the music industry and the TV and film industry are doing now,
right? That
would be ideal for the consumers, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Obviously we'd lose a lot of gaming companies in the wake, but
yeah, for sure.
I think, well, but, at least mostly the IPs would get sold off, so the franchises could survive.
Yeah, there's always that whole thing of, are they paying attention to this? Are they looking at how one by one, like it happened with the music industry, and then that exact same thing happened with the TV and film industry, and then it's moving on toward games and everything else. Like, I wonder how many people are paying attention to that. Hopefully they're being aware of it and trying to stay in front of it.
Yeah, I don't know, because it's hard once you get to those big giant company sizes, it's very hard to maneuver. You're forced down this path. You've got to, placate your shareholders, and your projects are expected to be of a certain scale and scope and cost a certain amount and have a certain amount invested into marketing. And so like that, you just get on that loop, and you're generally, especially with, if we look at Bethesda, whom we are all close to, their schedule rolls out in 3 to 5 year cycles. So that something like that could upend the market overnight, something like a sensational game using all of these new tech, and then they're stuck on this 5-year plan. It's, it'll take a while for those big companies to react to such a thing. Even if they're aware of it, they're still trying to chase the dollar. And I'm not one of those anti-capitalist people. I'm actually very pro-capitalism. I understand why that happens and everything. So I know that often, every time I bring something up with money, people are like, "Oh yeah, they're chasing the dollar and stuff." It's like, well, what else can you do? I mean,
and that's why
if you're not chasing profit, you're not going to exist very long. Like,
the world runs on money, and you need money to do anything. So you have to fuel. It's fuel. It's fuel exactly. For these projects.
Absolutely. So, if it wasn't for that, then each of them would be a farmer raising their families.
Yeah, exactly. and not to jump back again, but that's what killed MySpace was got way too big, too bloated. Couldn't maneuver fast enough, couldn't make changes fast enough, because it was, MySpace was owned by Fox, and it had like we had like 8 offices around the world and like 1,300 employees. And it was just like, it was so big that to make a change on the homepage, it took like 3 months or something to go through all the approvals and design processes and this and that and change it. It was just, it was a dinosaur, and that's what ultimately killed it. So point being that I've witnessed that kind of thing happen before, and it definitely can, it can happen to anyone that's not swift enough to adapt. So what I would like to see happen with a lot of these big game companies, if they're smart, they should do, like I'm thinking, I don't know, like let's say like Ubisoft or whatever, they should all be spooling up kind of like new publishing, kind of indie publishing studios that are like lesser, use a different name, use different branding just to keep it at arm's length from the main company. Mm-hmm. And if they were smart, they would be trying to not get in front of, because that has like a negative connotation, but trying to maybe help sweep up and assist some of these indie game devs getting their games published. Like I really think every big game publisher should have an indie publishing wing to really nurture and support that movement so that they don't end up getting left behind. You know what I mean?
Right. I think a lot of them are. Like you see Microsoft's been buying up little game houses like crazy.
Big time.
And then there's, what's the company? Private Division from Take-Two, which was the publisher, going to be the publisher for, well, it is the publisher for Outer Worlds, and then Microsoft bought Obsidian. But I think a lot of them have those smaller companies. It's kind of like the film companies do the same thing. They've always got their little indie wings to watch out for those Sundance successes where they can, like, all right, let's roll this out globally. Kind of that sort of thing.
It's definitely seen more of that. And I think with Microsoft has been, at least from what I've observed anyway, probably one of the better ones. I remember, God, it's been a while now, but when they first started allowing indie publishers on their platform, like complete individuals, I'm trying to remember when that was. Like it was a while back. Maybe
it's so
it was
funny
like 6 or 7 years ago.
Microsoft has been humbled over the years, and now I'm actually like, aside from the one practice I really hate of theirs, is the forced Windows 10 updates. Not a fan of forced updates, but beyond that, now like I actually look at them fondly most of the time, versus having lived through their Monopoly days and stuff.
I feel like Apple needs a little bit of a reminder of what that's like, but and maybe a few other companies, of course. But yeah, Microsoft definitely, I think, is doing things right on the gaming front for sure.
Yeah, I can't speak to the rest of this because the Windows thing drives me nuts. It's actually one of the reasons I am. So I've been asking everybody. Well, I haven't been asking. It's just been coming up. But the whole Epic Store thing. What's your take on that? Because to me, I see Steam as a monolith that is choking out the rest of the competition, and I'm not a fan of it. And that it's got their high dev fees, and now they've got forced updates on all their games, and that drives me insane.
Yeah. So this is one of those situations where it's easy to get hypocritical because, like we were just saying, people are talking about how monopolies are terrible and there's a lot of people don't like monoliths generally. Which there should, I'm of the mind that there should always be strong competition among everything. Mm-hmm. So it keeps, it's good for the consumer. It keeps businesses lean and everything else. But long story short, I think I love Steam. I think Steam has been it's like the staple. It's safe. It's comfortable. It's kind of the it's the awesome uncle of the gaming industry or whatever, if you want to use a weird metaphor. But I think when other people make launchers, I see all these comments on Reddit and stuff. People being like, "Oh my God, I can't believe they're doing their own launcher. Just use Steam. Oh, like count down until it's back on Steam and da da da." But you can't. I feel like you can't have two minds that way. Like if you don't like monoliths and you don't like monopolies, then be consistent. You know what I mean? I think it's healthy for, and maybe these other launchers don't go as well as the companies plan, and they shut them down or they tweak them or whatever. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just it's annoying sometimes, sure, because it changes what you're used to. Mm-hmm. But I'm not inherently against the idea. Like if people can get their launchers up and by all means be critical of them. I think that's an important distinction, is that being critical of something doesn't mean you want it to be abolished. You can say, hey guys, your Epic launcher sucks and you need to make it work better, or we're not going to buy your game. Okay, well maybe that will push them to fix it, and then you'll have a great launcher. and ideally anyway.
Right. Well, I think the controversies there's so much stacked against Epic Store One right now that a lot of people educated me on was like the fact that they were collecting data from Steam illicitly, and so people were basically calling it spyware. And now, obviously, the big one that's got everybody all up in a tizzy over it that's a weird phrase to use anymore. Is the exclusives. Is that it's like we'd play on PC because we don't want to deal with exclusives. Like if we wanted exclusives, we'd go play. We'd be PlayStation players. I guess I don't really care which launcher I'm using for the games personally, because I've already got, like you mentioned, I've got the Bethesda launcher, I've got the Battle.net. At one point I had Origin installed, and like there's all of these companies I feel like have been incentivized to create their own private launchers because of Steam's pricing practices. So they almost did it to themselves, because if their prices were closer in line to what it would cost those companies to actually serve out that content, they wouldn't have done it in the first place. But
yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, looking at it from that angle, again, I was just kind of speaking to the idea of them existing in general. So yeah, I'm fine with them existing, but yeah, if they're going to be doing anything shady, or they're going to be doing, like you said, the exclusive thing, or there's things like that, they push the wrong buttons, and yeah, I think it kind of sucks. But again, I feel people, especially the gaming community is one of the loudest of all communities I've ever seen. I mean, I don't see this kind of community interaction with film or TV or the news or anything. I mean, it's crazy. So, and in a good way. So messages get heard.
Right.
So I think it's important for people to, that whole thing of voting with your wallet is extremely important. But yeah, I'm definitely not into like weird, shady practices. And especially like with, in this day and age, recent day and age, with data being such a controversial thing to be handling. Right. I mean, data's gotten leaked all over I don't even have to tell you. It's
oh my God,
like personal data is just everywhere. It's a wreck. So people need to like not touch that with a 10-foot pole,
Yeah, the whole data thing is crazy. In fact, the number of times I've been emailed by like companies like Facebook and be like, "Oh, sorry, your details were accidentally leaked." It's like, all right, well, I guess I am screwed there. And so I've had a LifeLock or one of those companies installed in place for years now because of this.
That's smart.
You just keep hearing about Facebook screwing up because they were trying to be a super open platform and make money by allowing advertisers in, and then those people aren't secure with the data. So yeah, it's a big mess. But I think most of us are pretty well, our stuff's out there. It's just a matter of time before the wrong person sifts through and combines all of
totally. Yeah, I had somebody right. I got a letter once a few years back that was like, "Oh, thanks for joining Verizon. Here's your new phone number details." I'm like, I did not. So I had to call them. Thankfully, they, at this point, they're so used to it, they closed it up immediately and didn't charge me or anything. But yeah, I definitely had my identity stolen more than once, and it's not fun. But thankfully, knock on wood, that's me knocking on wood. That it's never been anything really bad, just something stupid like a credit card or a cell phone opened in my name or whatever. But anyway,
most of the time these companies are really good about squashing that. But it's still frightening to think that for most of us, there's somebody out there, are a group of people out on the internet who are selling our data wholesale with everything. Yes. It's got our phone number, it's got our past addresses, it's got our places of work, probably all of that stuff combined, and they just have a profile on us, and that's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's frightening. It is frightening because there's so much that you can do in people's names. Buy cars, buy houses. And that's not even the nefarious stuff. You can do all. It's bad. So
right. Google just shut down a guy who had forged a bunch of documentation that they were a high-level exec and got like 40 million out of Google that way.
Yeah, that was crazy. I saw that article the other day too. The guy, he got 122 million in total simply by forging bills to Facebook and Google. And because he was doing it in such a way, it was almost like the Office Space film where the guy's taking the fraction of a percent or whatever. Right. He was billing them in such a way to where they were just paying the bills without question. And the dude scammed 122 million before he got caught. I'm like, man, you should have called it a day at 1 million and then ran off.
Especially because he was in Eastern Europe, I think. So that first million would have went quite the ways.
Yeah, totally. But sometimes people get the greed goes to their head and they run with it. So
Yeah. Oh,
but
man,
yeah, weird times we live in. We
is
live in a cyberpunk novel these days.
Right, exactly. Oh man. Speaking of cyberpunk, are you looking forward to Cyberpunk 2077, or is it
I am
2277?
super. Yeah, it's 2077. I am super hyped. So I'm not. I always tell people I'm a bad gamer because like I don't play every game that comes out. I don't play. I'm not. I'm super hooked on Bethesda games for the most part.
Sure.
And so, of course, I've like played Witcher 3 and loved it. And there's a number of games that I play. But, I pick them up. I play them for 10, 20 hours, whatever. And then I'm kind of like, all right, I'm going to go back to Skyrim or Fallout or whatever. But modding being a part of that.
Because you're doing better than I am. I can't even say I do the 10 to 20 hours. I either ignore them or I purchased all the PS4 exclusives because they looked amazing.
Yeah.
Like the Last of Us and what's that new one with the robot dinosaurs? Horizon Zero Dawn.
Oh yeah, Horizon Zero Dawn.
God of War. Like I pick those up and just leave them in a pile and never find the time to play them.
Yeah, I've done that with a couple. There's just something about being able to tweak things to the way you want them that makes the games just so much better. But anyway, oh god, what was I saying? Oh, it's Cyberpunk. So
Cyberpunk, yeah.
I'm like that's my jam. Like I am so in on that. I never played the tabletop. I knew all about it. But just that like cyberpunk vibe of that world, that future, everything, like that's totally my stuff. So I'm super hyped for that.
Yeah, it looks incredible. And I know there's a bunch of people who have complained about the daylight scenes, but I think that looks gorgeous. I love that.
Oh, they look amazing.
To do that daytime LA like that. Oh man, that looks awesome.
Oh yeah.
And then you'll be able to have both. I think you can have that day night cycle and have those Blade Runner moments, but also have some almost Back to the Future looking moments.
I think that a lot of people are afraid of falling into tropes too much. Like they didn't want to do the night raining city neon whatever, which I guarantee you that's in the game. But sure. I think for like just the trailer, they wanted to show it from a different angle, and I'm glad they did because it brought it was like GTA Cyberpunk. It was pretty awesome. So
I think I think that's the fear right there. Is it just becomes GTA with basically you've got a few cyber enhancements on your character, and that's the same.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the name of the city is Night City, so come on, man. There's going to be some dope Night City scenes. Right. It's going to be cool. Yeah. So I'm pretty stoked for that. I can't remember. Did they announce a release date? They did, didn't they? Or is that going to be? I think
they said that it's between 2019 and 2020. They're going to release that and one other AAA story-driven RPG.
Oh,
so they've had something secret in the works this whole time, apparently, which makes sense because I think they started work on Cyberpunk like 8 years ago or something. And that's a long run.
That's a long, yeah.
I mean, that's as long as they spent on Red Dead Redemption 2.
Brutal.
So it's not common game companies do that.
Yeah, that's true. CDPR, they're one of those companies that like, when Witcher 3 came out, I was like, oh, they're leading the charge in where games should go. They've got the good balance of kind of open world combined with story driven stuff, and the gameplay was really tight and that looked gorgeous. And I'm like, I think they're definitely pushing some frontiers. And I think with Cyberpunk, hopefully they're going to be doing the same. I'm just a little disappointed at some of like the things I've heard. And again, you can never trust unless you actually know, but some of the working conditions and some of the, there've been people that have jumped online and been like, oh, I used to work there and it's a sweatshop and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, who knows if the person's lying or not, but, it's, I've got mixed feelings about them as a company in general. And I don't want to make that affect how I view their creations too much, but I have high hopes for them as a studio. I really hope that things keep going well for them, and that things for their employees keep going well, and that these new games help them expand and kind of squash any internal issues they have, because they're amazing.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that things go that way, and I guess Red Dead is the same thing. Is that it has that same background behind it of it's this absolutely incredible experience, but it's made on the sweat and blood of a lot of people that were underpaid.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like that's one of those arguments that goes anti-capitalism of like, that's kind of the ultimate goal is to get things streamlined down to this hyper efficient slimmed down machine that can build these amazing things, but it's at the cost of the labor. And that's where.
Sure.
Now, I think one of the differences between CDPR and who's the company that makes Red Dead? I can never remember the name of them. And GTA.
Was it
Take Five?
It's
Rockstar. Thank you. I think the difference between those two is their locations. Like the amount of money they probably have to pay the employees for Rockstar is going to be substantially higher than the amount of money they have to pay people in Poland. So I think that's allowing CDPR to kind of come out of left field with this, because I don't think that Witcher 1 and 2 were particularly good sellers, and I didn't find them to be particularly great games personally. I found them very difficult to get into. So
sure, same.
They almost snuck in the back door there on the backs of their employees. But I guess if your options are to work really hard for one of the few companies, because I guess from what I understand, the CDPR is also one of the highest grossing companies in Poland.
That's amazing.
And so for that, to be able to work for a company like that, even to bust your ass, is probably something to be proud of. And I think I think what you're referring to is a lot of expats who went there to try and work and found out that it's like, oh, I'm not willing to work as hard as the people here.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, there's a big cultural difference too. And I mean, that whole conversation could devolve into a whole other topic. But culture, just sort of, we're in the midst of kind of a homogenization of cultures, and that's been ongoing since World War I and II. I mean, as cultures have started to kind of blend and merge together and whatnot, and with the internet, that's when it's leveled the playing field a lot. So, point being, I think we're just, there's those growing pains where you've got like you said, you've got Rockstar here in the States, or they're based in the States, right?
I believe they're in I think they're out of California, but somebody's going to correct us.
I think they are. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, at least the headquarters. And then, you've got a big shop in Poland. Okay, so these two AAA game companies, you've got, people making LA salaries or whatever, California salaries versus wherever it is in Poland. It's apples to oranges when you start comparing that stuff. So if you're comparing the output versus the, what it took to make, when the cultural and the work culture and the pay culture and all that kind of stuff is very different, it starts getting really hard to, you can't really hold them to the same kind of standards that you would a company in California, because it's a completely different country with completely different rules and stuff. So as much as it might suck, that's just kind of how things roll there. And again, hopefully that, with this kind of exposure to working conditions in other parts of the industry, that it balances out better, that they'll be able to take better care of their people and whatnot if they can.
Well, I think some of it will solve itself also with all these technologies we're talking about. So as a lot of these AI and photogrammetry and stuff take away a lot of the labor that's necessary to produce them, it won't have to be quite as gratuitous on the amount of hours that people are expected to work.
Less grueling and things like that. Yeah, like, if you've got a motion capture guy and he's like, if I remember, I watched like a Witcher 3 documentary, and they had like a primary lead motion capture guy that did all of the motion capture, at least the initial stuff.
Okay.
So he was like their mocap guy. And so he recorded every movement of every character and everything. And he probably busted his ass. He probably worked like, I don't even want to guess. That dude probably just...
Because the animations are beautiful in that game.
Gorgeous. And so, again, if things like motion cap get better to where that guy can do the same stuff in, an 8-hour workday instead of a 12-hour workday, or, whatever else, that's, that hopefully that's where that would lean.
The two big things I'm waiting to see breakthroughs in technologically are mocap and audio being able to be generated via AI, because I think those are going to be two of the biggest things that indie developers or individuals don't have access to and can't just produce out of nowhere. So you can So we've already got AI libraries that can help generate a lot of art, and you can also just purchase packs of that. The same doesn't hold true for voice files, but there have already been several huge breakthroughs in that haven't really gone mainstream yet, but they're on the verge of. So Amazon's working on one through their game company, and they've shown some demos of it. It is very impressive to where...
Yeah, there was another one with Google as well, but go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, you can basically choose a voice type, and you can type up stuff, and it'll actually voice it out, and it's got some amount of inflection in it, and it's usable enough to give you a good idea if the core of your game is solid, so that you can. Because right now, have you done much quest modding in any of the Bethesda games?
Yes.
Okay, so you know how you generally start with Robo Voice just to make sure that things flow fairly well. There's a hole in that. There's something missing. Is that you don't recognize? It's hard to recognize if there's a problem with the the
delivery or emotion
delivery,
or whatever,
right? Or maybe it doesn't flow quite right, and you won't always catch that until after you have the final performances in. Well, this could help solve some of that. That then you take it one step further. Something Adobe showed a couple of years ago, and it kind of disappeared. And it felt to me like I go conspiracy theory with it and say this disappeared because of the implications it has on real life. But they showed something where they were able to take an actor's voice and record it in, and then generate new dialogue off of it. And they only had used a small sampling. Yeah.
That was like that deep fake level stuff.
Right, right.
Like, what the hell? Yeah, that's getting some Black Mirror level stuff. Yeah.
Right. But man, that would be cool as a game creator. It would be so cool to have as a game creator.
Oh yeah, that'd be killer. Especially if you could do things like, okay, the main protagonist and the 5 or 6 main characters in the story are voiced by celebrities, so that we've got the good. But then every NPC is using this AI where you can't really tell if it's an actor or not, and so all the merchants and whatever else have a unique voice, but hey, it's all generated with AI, so we didn't have to spend 6 months hiring 25 voice actors. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and
so
then you can also jack up the amount of stuff you're willing to put in. So, like you can have 1,000 different hellos in there in your writing, and have it make sure that these people sound completely 100% unique all the time, because it's a lot easier to write than it is to record and process audio and cut it. And I mean, my God, the difference. That's why we have
it's gonna get
look at the dialogue between New Vegas and Fallout 4. I mean, there's a reason that you have so many more options. It's because it's a lot easier to type than it is to do all of the other stuff that's associated with voice acting.
Yeah, and so for things like that, that brings up the fear of what's going to happen to voice actors? Like, are they going to become obsolete? And that's a legitimate scare. I mean, pretty much anybody that produces anything is at risk of becoming obsolete in lieu of automation. I think to a bigger degree than a lot of people are willing to accept.
Right.
And that it's going to happen in a wave. Like, it's just going to it's going to be exponential, I think, once it starts. But that's, all the more reason, with voice actors, for example, they're going to need, like that Adobe thing, for example, they still had to record an original voice to get the inflections and the general tone scape or whatever of the voice. So maybe, as a voice actor, you're, instead of charging per line, you're actually licensing your voice to this company to do whatever with. So maybe the profit margin on that's higher. So
I mean, I wouldn't, but what's really a shame about it is I wouldn't doubt if some of these companies, especially like Amazon, who know this is coming, have already started. Let's license the voice now. We'll pay them a huge chunk.
Yeah,
and like they aren't going to understand the repercussions of this.
Right. They'll be like, hey, well, how's $100 to record you saying, hello, how are you? And they're like, okay, sure. And then we get to use it for whatever we want. Okay, sure. Now we've got your whole voice, Yeah, I guarantee. I'm sure that's happening. So, you can't really fight that. I mean, that's at the end of the day, Amazon's just going to look at numbers on a spreadsheet about, ROI. So
those are problems. I think those are problems we'll solve. As society,
humans are incredible at adapting. We'll come up with ways to,
I mean, like there was all this problem during the Industrial Revolution, and now we have lots of people working, and like we have way more people than we did back then. So,
I am totally of the mind of embracing change and adapting. I mean, with everything. So,
well, I mean, the alternative, you try and fight the change, and it's just going to end in violence.
And it's still going to move forward without you.
It's going to move forward anyway, right? So it's
still trying to fight to keep steam and coal factories and stuff. It just doesn't make sense, So move forward.
Yeah, and that's why I'm trying to look at things from the positive light. If I look at it, so like maybe those are after effects, and we'll have to deal with those. But the positive side of looking at it from a gamer perspective is that we're going to start seeing. I think we'll be able to see smaller teams who are willing to put in the hours and effort to polish the rougher edges, and they'll just make use of all of these systems instead of reinventing the wheel over and over again, which a lot of these AAA studios seem to do. They will just be like, all right, well, I'm going to just stand on your shoulders and take advantage of all of this work, not spend all of my resources on developing new, art that gets, a 1% better look to it, and instead focus on these other things, because all that stuff can be automated. And that's where I'm excited, especially as a game creator now. And I made this argument, the last person I spoke to on the podcast, that it's almost like modders, people who not modders like you and I making mods, but mod players are almost becoming game designers in a sense, because they're taking all of these little components and pieces and piecing them together and making themselves their perfect game.
Sure. It's incredible. Go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say. So I think anybody listening here who plays a lot of mods, you have it in you to be a game developer. You just need access to the right tools, and you need to have have that belief you can go forward and do it. Because I would bet there are some people out there, and that they exist, because there'll be the occasional. Not mod pack, because we're not there yet, and I think that's something else I'd like to talk about in a minute. But they have those lists of like, here are the mods I'm using for this experience. I've worked on it for months and months and months. It plays like this, blah blah blah, and you just follow that list, install those mods. It has all, it has a load order for you to follow. And like those guys, I bet, would make amazing video games if they had the resources.
Totally. So yeah, that speaks to the power of curators, and that's a word that comes with it, some sourness in some people's minds. Like you think about Instagram curator, or not curators, but Instagram celebrities and stuff.
Right.
But curation in general has been extremely powerful in every industry. Between music, you have people that are music directors that are they're so good at putting others. They can't write a tune in music to save their life, but they're so good at pulling the right songs together to match a scene in a film or whatever, that there's people that make millions of dollars a year just by telling film companies, oh, you should use this track for this love scene. And you know what I mean? Like, because they know what's up and how to piece this stuff together. So the same thing, like you said, with modding, that's something I was thinking about recently, is how I keep seeing more and more of these guides pop up that are, here's a whole specific set of mods that, as you said, to get a certain play style or whatever else, they've spent the time to play through all that stuff. And sorry, I have to stop and hit re-record. You're going to have to edit that part because my microphone dropped out for a second. Okay.
Oh, bummer. So, I could hear you.
Yeah, just the recording blanked out for some reason. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go. So being able to piece all those things together and make a unique experience, I've noticed that has risen up a lot in the last year or two with both games. Skyrim, there's been a ton of amazing guides with, like 200 mods pieced together. And so, yeah, those people, they have that power to... they're curating the experience, and with that kind of a mindset, that's really the most important aspect, is that kind of awareness of all those fronts and how to change the gameplay. So yeah, it's really cool.
So what are your thoughts on things like that? So one of the downsides that come with curation is that it becomes a lot harder to get. It almost becomes harder to get found, because once you curated out a handful of your best creators, people tend to gravitate those and create a hierarchy. And then it's kind of like what happened on YouTube. You've got the top 10 guys with PewDiePie on top, and those are the people that the majority of people go to, because that's what's blopped into their lap via algorithm. And so then it becomes a lot harder to claw your way up. It's especially that I hear Twitch is especially brutal in that regard, due to how much curation they do. What are your thoughts in that realm?
Just kind of with regard to that, like, algorithm type thing in general, or specifically
just the idea
with,
of like that's stuff? I mean, that's the ultimate form of curation, right? Like, if you're gonna say you're gonna have millions of people creating content. Obviously, modding is a different thing. If someone were curating modding, there's only a couple hundred mods get released a day across all things, whereas something like YouTube has millions of submissions every day. They obviously have to go to AI. But I think even sans the AI, I think ultimately what ends up happening is you start to filter out the people that are the best, and then it becomes harder for somebody who might be very good to get a foothold enough to give them that inspiration to keep going. So I'll use myself as an example. So I released Salvage Beacons. had that mod net been successful, so if people just ignored it, I probably would not have made some settlements, just because I wouldn't have got that motivation to keep going, knowing that people care about what I'm working on. And I wonder how much of that happens in the spaces of these curated platforms, where there's people who are very good. They probably have the discipline and work. What would the term be? Like they have the will, and they're the type of person who would work through and deliver a good product if given the proper motivation to do so. That those people might be turned away from those platforms.
Yeah, I think in general, I guess starting from the outside and working our way in general, I think that's a big issue that needs to be solved. Like when the internet first kind of started to blossom, it really felt flat. Like if you did something good and you could get noticed and you can get heard, like, you know, there were no barriers. There wasn't as much of these. There was no algorithm. There was no PewDiePie. There was, you know what I mean? There wasn't. there weren't these kind of holes that end up being formed by algorithms. So I think that's a problem in general. I think a lot of it discourages a lot of people, and it's that can turn into a whole topic of its own. But I think is with regard to mod, I think it is true. I think, like you said, even with my stuff, if I hadn't, you know, built on the success of kind of previous releases, then a lot of the things that I released wouldn't have had the same kind of reception or reaction or popularity or whatever. I think it's tricky. I don't think that we're quite to the point with modding where it's as big of a problem yet, I would hope. But I think timing has been a big issue where, you know, like if I had not released True Storms for Fallout 4 when I did, you know, I released it like 2 months after the game came out. And it got press in, you know, PC Gamer and all this other stuff because Fallout 4 was still a hot game that everybody was, you know, still talking about, and mods were just barely coming out. So, you know, I've seen there was somebody that I know, they released a texture mod or something a few months back, and they were kind of disappointed at how it didn't do very well. But you know, it was a numbers game. Like at that point, how many people are active and downloading it and whatever else. Kind of getting a little off point, but I would hope that there's, I don't know. I feel like there's more room for those currently anyway. Those people that are the curators. I think there's a lot of space for them to grow, and I don't think unless Nexus starts kind of, you know, pigeonholing that kind of stuff. Or I guess kind of using an algorithm or whatever, that I think there's a lot of open playing field. But I don't know. I might be getting off track of what you were trying to make.
No, so what I was steering us to is something that Robin announced a month ago that I'm excited for and I think is necessary. But I can see that this could be the downside of it, and that's mod packs. So
okay.
So they said they are going to try and solve mod packs, and I think that's absolutely necessary. I think the mod scene, especially after Bethesda stuck it into SSE and Fallout 4 in the game, has gotten big enough to the point where that we now have a casual user base. It's no longer dedicated hobbyists. There are a lot of people who want this, who can't do it because it's more work than they have time or will to put in. So we need a solution for those users if we're going to continue to grow. And there's the truism that if you stop growing, you die. It's a truism for a reason. Like every group, if you stop expanding, eventually you will die off because people will feel like that they need to do something else because the thing they're a part of isn't going anywhere. Like it's just this weird natural human tendency is that everything seems to need to keep growing. So I think modding is the same thing. We have to keep growing the community, and the way to grow, we eventually hit a cap of the number of people who are willing to put in all of the effort to get these mods working. And so the solution are those guys who come up with those big lists. But right now, if you are a casual mod player and you take a look at one of those lists, it's going to take you 6 or 7 hours to get it set up. I mean, between downloading all the files, following all of the instructions, even if they lay them out to you step by step, it's going to take a long time. And that's not a good user experience. Not when we're used to being able to, for free, download a ton of different games at AAA quality that will give us thousands of hours of gameplay for free. So that, to me, mod packs is the natural solution to that problem. But there's the thing we just talked about, that essentially creates a group of curators. All the people who create the first most popular mod packs become the curators, and then our mod authors were almost going to be like trying to convince these curators they should put our mod in the pack. And then you also have the other issue, and I know this is why mod packs haven't been a thing in Bethesda games to date, and this is one I'm really curious where you sit on, is that a lot of mod authors pushed back that they felt they wouldn't get credit. that instead the credit
Right.
is going to go to the curator, to the creator of the pack, which is a very legitimate concern. What are your thoughts on all that? I just gave lots to pick apart there, but answer.
No, that's fine. So, I mean, this kind of tails in with I remember, I'm trying to remember the name of that platform that came out that was doing there was Mod Picker, but then there was the one that everybody rallied against. Anyway, yeah, this has been a hot topic, obviously, that's come up a couple of times. I've always had the mindset that it can be done right and that it should be done right because, as you said, the barrier for entry into making mods, let alone just using them, is really high. I mean, for the average game player, they're like, what, mod organize? What? They don't understand what any of these files are. And then they're just like, I don't have time for this crap, So yeah, it's I think solving the mod packs is something that is a very good idea, and I support it as long as it can be done in a good way. Like if there's some third party that's monetizing mod packs and like that's not the way to do it. That's sure. Shady, and that's not the right way, obviously.
Which that's what that last one that got reamed out was about, right? That was their big problem. Exactly. Is and I think they were also rehosting the things on top of it.
Yes, and they were, backpedaling a little bit after the fact to try to make some of that better, which I give them credit for. Again, I'm not, totally trying to rail against their ideas or whatever, but it wasn't the right way. So sure. I didn't catch that Nexus announced that, so that's interesting. If they can do it right, then it would be really good. So to get to some of the finer points of it. So I support it. I would be more than willing to have any of my stuff be part of mod packs, especially through the Nexus, because, the Nexus has my trust, and I know that they would factor in all that stuff. So
right. In fact, they've said they're going to bring in as many mod authors as they can into the conversation because they don't want to screw this up.
That's great. So I feel like it's starting off the right way, it sounds. And then as far as, so on the user end of things, I think it's great. So if somebody goes, they want that, there's the one for Skyrim that is really popular right now is I think the Nordic guide to Skyrim or something like that. It's like Sounds the right, Nordic playthrough. A lot of really good mods. So yeah, if that was like, hey, click here to download the Nordic guide as a single mod pack. And you just run it and you're like, hey, wow, holy crap, my game is totally different now. One and done. That's amazing. That's an incredible user experience. That's an evolution.
And I'm fairly certain that's what Vortex is designed around too. I think that they've had this infrastructure in so that it's going to be one button. It creates a new profile in Vortex and boom, you're up and running. Like obviously it has to go download, 100 gigs of files or whatever, but
and sort them properly and all that. Right. That's cool.
Yeah, that's what I think that they're preparing for.
Because I mean, not to get into the geeky part of it, but under the covers, it's really a manifest of just kind of which mods should go in which order at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you've got a profile with these different mods, it doesn't sound like it's going to be too hard for them to implement, is my point from a technical perspective.
Right. I think the
sticky stuff is community.
Yeah, I think a lot of sticky stuff's community. Like I think one of the things that will discourage are faux mod installers, which I'm actually against. I actually think we shouldn't. I think as creators, we should be doing a better job of making sure things are just plug and play and offering the options within the game as much as possible. I know that's not always possible with some of the options, but
sure. Yeah, I've actually started to, not to go off, but for quick side note, we can come right back, is that my perspective on installers and even MCM menus has changed over the years. Like I am more of your mindset where things should be refined to a point, within reason, of course, to where you may not even need a menu. Like you should get it to the point where everything is functioning how it should be when you download it.
Right.
But there's so many things that the MCM itself is the mod. You know what I mean? There's so many things you can do. So
I like the MCM options for people after the fact once they've gotten comfortable with it. Yes. But I think out of the box, it should be designed for the average player. Like,
yeah, I'm definitely not anti MCM by any means. It's incredible. I think that it's easy to rely, not even rely, but I think architect your product around like putting all these options in that probably don't even need to be options if you just refined it a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, I'm guilty of that. I have too many options in my mod. Absolutely.
Whatever.
Yeah. I'm striving toward what you're just saying, is trying to think of ways to refine it, because it becomes overwhelming to the point where it paralyzes users.
Sure.
You only like you have a certain number of options that people are willing to tolerate as a new person, and then they almost need to be just like locked down further and further, where you almost need to force the person to put in a little more work just to prove that they are a fan and that they're that into sense. It.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like everything should have. I'm not anti-settings, definitely for sure. Like, there's so many settings that I wish existed in a lot of games that aren't there. Like every game, I feel like should have an advanced settings menu that you can tweak things like nighttime darkness and all that kind of stuff out of the box. So I'm definitely all for that. But anyway, getting back to my original point, just from the compatibility angle is where I was going.
Okay,
if you do have as you mentioned, if you've got a bunch of mods that all have installers and different options, you start to really make the permutations of the types of installations start to run wild. And so then it gets harder to make these mod packs guaranteed to work, with just a one click. So maybe it is that when it's part of a mod pack, you have to just live with the default installation of one of these mods or whatever. And who's to say you can't mod a mod pack? Like, you can install the mod pack and then add on patches after. So I think there's ways around it.
Well, and it might also be the way the FOMOD is written too. The way that format is written, it wouldn't be hard technically for the creator of the mod pack to define default answers for each of them either. To where Vortex could theoretically, if they do that, handle whatever that creator
part
set
of a
up.
mod pack, then just do the default and leave the FOMOD out of it. Yeah, that's totally possible. Yeah, so I think that's the technical stuff's all easy to solve. Anyway, circling back to the sticky parts.
Yeah.
So, and this has come up a lot, even with when paid mods came up and all this. I mean, anytime there's any sort of thing regarding copyright and ownership and credit and all of this, opinions, they vary the spectrum and emotions run high, and understandably so, because for a lot of people, these are passion projects. And because these are passion projects, it's very close to the chest. These things that people are making and releasing. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way about your stuff. It's, somebody didn't just come by and pay you to make something that you don't care about. This is something you put your personal time and by way of that, your own value and even possibly money into to keep running. So I understand when people have these very strong emotions, like, I'll never have it as part of a mod pack, and I don't, because I won't have the right credit. I totally understand that, and that should always be somebody's right.
Yeah.
But I think there is a way to possibly solve that. I mean, like, if I were to think about, okay, if my stuff ended up in a mod pack, would I get the right credit? And this lends kind of more to the discussion we were having a minute ago about your credibility growing. And if you release a mod and it does well, it kind of helps your future releases. If somebody released something that was really cool and it got put into a mod pack right away, and people ended up figuring out about it by way of the mod pack, and it became a blur, the next thing this person releases may not get the same kind of attention because it was sort of, hidden underneath the hood of this mod pack. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, how do you deal with
that? Off the top of my head, the only thing I could think is, having to... Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. It would just have to be surfaced somewhere very obvious. So, like, even just within Vortex itself, if you had this mod pack installed, it should really show front and center what is in it and who it's by.
Right, but let's say you have a mod. I mean, now that we have ESL format, you could easily, you will have mod packs of 500 mods. You're not going to look through 500 names, and even if there's going to be a lot of overlap, you'll probably see, there's usually like 30 or 40 mod authors out there who will each have a dozen or more mods, and so you'll have some overlap, but you're still probably talking hundreds of names in a pack like that. No one's going to look through that.
Sure. Well, I guess that's going from the perspective of if they're actually going to merge the mods together into a single file, which I don't know would be the case.
No, I think they would be individual, but you're still going to have, let's say I download this pack and it's got this curated list of mods, and there are literally 500 mods in it, and it's Vortex wants to make this one click for the user. Where do they display that, all of the different people are contributed to it in a way that the user would be willing to look through it? It's kind of like the credits in the movies.
Sure.
There are some people. I know a lot of people stay around and watch the Marvel credits, but they don't stay for the actual credits. They're staying for those little scenes.
For the end little scene, yeah.
I have heard of a few people who say, who especially those people who have friends or family in the film industry, they say, I actually watch all credits because I feel like I owe it to the creators. That is not the majority view in any way.
Yeah, I don't watch credits all the time unless unless I'm interested in something specific or whatever. Yeah, so that's hard. I think that might be just something that people might have to be willing to give into, because you think about Skyrim, do you go, who made the ebony armor? I mean, sure, the super fans know the lead artists that designed all that stuff, but most people would be like, what? I don't know. I just know Bethesda, Skyrim. I love the game. Who cares, right? So,
right.
But yeah, that's a really tough call, because the people that are working and making these things are being paid to do so. So it's kind of like by the nature of their role, they lose a little bit of that visibility in lieu of being, having it be their career. So
right.
If attention and credit and, maybe a little bit of donations here and there are the only things that a mod author has to run on, I guess it's just up to them whether or not they're comfortable kind of releasing a little bit of that visibility to be part of a mod pack.
Yeah, I can there's a couple of things I can think of that they should do, and hopefully, I'm assuming these these feel like obvious things that they would do to me. One would be opt-in, so all mods would have to be opted in to be able to be eligible to be put in mod packs.
Absolutely.
I think number 2 would be automatic donation points. So, for example, if a mod pack gets downloaded, all of the donation points get spread among the mods that are part of it. That's good. That would be one thing. Another thing I would see. And then I think it might just require community coordination to promote individual mod authors. So, for example, never put the mod packs in the hot files. Always put the individual mods in there instead.
Okay, I see.
To try and those are some ideas I've been thinking of, because this to me seems like this is going to be such a huge game changer for the mod community when it happens.
Yes.
So I'm thinking a lot about it now. But
no, that's really good. I think that. Go ahead.
I still don't think that solves all the problems, and it doesn't solve all the concerns. It's some.
No, I think there's going to have to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of reactionary stuff. Like, there's not going to ever be a perfect rollout plan. Like, their first rollout, there's going to be something that they didn't think of and that they're going to have to sort out. I mean, that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
But I really like the donation points being spread across the files, and then having the files bubble up as individual files. That's a really good idea. I hadn't thought about that. So,
well, you could especially do it with the smaller mods that never made it to hot file in their earlier days.
Totally.
If the mod pack itself gets enough downloads, because for those of you who don't know, the way the hot file system works is within a 2-week period, if it gets X number of endorsements higher than all of the other most popular mods with endorsements, it goes to hot files. So they could theoretically just change that and say, like, okay, all endorsements that go to this mod pack are also given to all of the mods inside, and then we let those and then we let those move within the hot file system. Like, that could be a cool thing.
That could be a really
you
cool
could see all sorts of random little tiny mods ending up in hot files.
Yeah, that could be a really cool way to, and I don't know how it would work with like the timing of things, if it would mess up, like, because if you took the time limit off certain things that are just downloaded, like, I don't know, True Storms and Sim Settlements, right? Like, those are highly downloaded because they're at the top. They would end up kind of going back in there, but they wouldn't be eligible.
I think because they've already been in there. Well, and I think they've already been in too. So I think that one of the limiters they have, and this is obviously their hot files algorithm, they can change it as they want to, but I'm pretty sure it's once you make it in, you can't ever make it in again.
Correct.
Even if you
you're out.
Those. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if I was just saying that if they found a way, like if somebody made a mod pack and they used like, this dude's bowl texture is out of control and it's from 2 years ago and it was a sleeper that nobody saw.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time for that dude to get some recognition, because now it's getting the shine on it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So maybe if it's part of a mod pack and has never been part of the hot files, maybe then it can become part of the hot files kind of posthumously,
Right.
So that's an idea. But the other thing I was going to say too is highlighting, just like they do when mods require, when there's requirements, you can actually see the link to the file and vice versa, showing that this mod is part of these mod packs. And vice versa, anytime there's a page or however they're going to display it for the mod pack, making very clear links to everything that's contained within inside of it. So yeah, I think all those things really do help. I really like that hot files kind of idea with the individual files instead of just the pack. That would be super good.
I'll be sure to suggest it to Robin when he comes out for comment, because that's what I'm waiting for. I assume that basically the way his newsletter, what it implied was, we're gonna tackle it this year. We are absolutely going to keep you all involved. We especially want to get mod authors in the conversation. So
that's great.
Yeah, it'll be very cool to see. I think there's no downside to players here. I think the downside, the problem is all on the shoulders of mod authors, and I think one of the things that will change where this will be less of an issue is with the next game. So whether it be 76 gets mod support or Starfield or whatever the big game that gets modded is, I think if those packs exist out of the box, like right from the get go, the people those people will just be used to it, right? Because they'll just be used to it. That's how it always has been.
Yep.
Because I think you've seen this because you've modded 2 games now, is that and I've brought this, I keep bringing this up, and I think it's because it's something I've just recognized and that's odd to me, is that it tends to be that each new game gets a core group of mod authors that don't necessarily go to the next game. They build up their pool of mods in that game, and then they're done. And that's what they're known for, and that's their thing. They don't it's not like every big Skyrim author moved to Fallout 4 automatically. It was not a guarantee.
Sure. Right.
And so
that's definitely the case.
So I think then with, whatever the next game is, a new core would emerge of mod authors, and they would have accepted it mentally that their stuff's going to be part of packs.
Yeah, nobody likes change. I mean, that's a scientific fact. Human brains do not like to change the way they think about things or shift or whatever, which, whatever. So yeah, I think that'll definitely be the thing. They'll iron it out now, and it'll probably have some hiccups. But yeah, once the next thing comes around, and it's just built in part of the system, it'll be a lot more acceptable and have less kinks. So it'll be smoothed out by then, I hope. But yeah, I think that at the bottom line, everything being opt-in, I think that solves 90% of the issue. Like when it's a third party trying to do it, you run into the issue of, because Nexus is where you get mods. Like bottom line, between Creation Club and the Bethesda.net modding, there's a huge amount of people that get their mods directly from there, but Nexus is still the biggest one. It's the primary place.
Well, and I think mod packs is something that I don't think Bethesda is ever going to tackle.
No, it's a lot of work to deal with. So Nexus is the place to do it. So the problem that's come up every other time has been that it's a third-party site or third-party application that is somehow trying to interact with Nexus or on their own and rehosting things. And that immediately, that's like a 50-foot wall that just pops right up at the gate.
Yeah.
So having it be on the Nexus, it just changes a lot of that. Like if we upload, say, I will allow this to be part of mod compilations, yes, no, and explain how the donation thing would work and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So I'm glad that, again, I didn't see that announcement. I'm happy that they're the ones to tackle it, because I think they're honestly the only ones that can right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. In fact, I was having a conversation with Nero the other day, and he brought up the point that one of the reasons that we can't, outside of he explained that the TOS that Bethesda puts out makes it such that the ESP belongs to Bethesda and we cannot sell that, but that the art assets we create belong to us still. That's even in the modern CK TOS, and that the reason that mods tend to still be free is because Nexus has a policy where they won't allow you to host them if you also have it for sale somewhere else. And so that Nexus has already made it clear to the community that they are pro gamer, they are pro consumer in this department, and they want to they're pushing for what's in our best interest in that regard. Like they are one of the people keeping paid mods at bay indirectly, because there are a million ways you could sell mods right now. And that if you did it that way, if you're like, we give out the ESP for free, you have to come to me to get the loose files, because there's Patreon and I can't remember the name. The one Nero uses, Gumtree. There's like Gumtree or just direct PayPal. Like there's tons of ways we could theoretically sell them things, but a gatekeeper like Nexus keeps that at bay, and that's to the benefit of all the players.
Sure. Yeah.
The point was that Nexus has shown that they are on the side of the gamer, so I think gamers will be pro them. And if it weren't for Nexus's the amount of effort they put for promotion and everything, those of us who are models wouldn't have nearly the audiences we do either.
Yeah, that's very true. It's very true. It's bringing it all the way back around to one of our earlier discussions. Something that, playing devil's advocate here, not trying to cause any controversial topics or anything, but
We always touch the edge of them. That's fine.
Yeah, let's touch the edge a little bit. Sort of in the way that Steam is this long-standing beloved behemoth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Nexus has been the kind of monopoly on modding,
That's
if
true.
you want to call it that.
That's very true.
Only because there has not been. Well, not only. I mean, they do a great job. Like Nexus is a really great site. It's Robin has done an incredible job with it. I think he's always handled any of the flare-ups and drama and anything that's happened. He's always handled it in a really good way and stuff. So huge props to them. So I'm not trying to do anything controversial here, but I just kind of based on our conversation earlier, I always just wonder what the landscape would look like if another modding site were to pop up that kind of challenged Nexus. But it's, how do you do that? And I'm not suggesting that there should be, because it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. But I just to kind of, like I said, play devil's advocate on our conversation earlier about Steam. Things like mod packs, I think that's come up as a topic a few times when people talk about mod packs, and they're like, oh, money shouldn't be involved. And then people say, well, or I'm sorry, not mod packs, but like the people that are monetizing mod packs, and people go, well, Nexus is monetizing mods because they have ads and this and that. It's like, yeah, but they put that money back into the site and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, not to open that Pandora's box.
I think that's a good point. I think the reason I think there hasn't been a substantial competitor to Nexus come out is money. Is that it costs a lot of money, and they have a full-size staff. Like, they have an office for Nexus. It costs a lot of money to run a site like this well. I don't think there's enough money in the scene to justify two companies. You know what I mean? Like, I think as soon as it gets big enough to where because right now what would happen is if somebody came up and was a reasonable competitor, it would likely put the hurt on Nexus as well, and everyone would suffer for it. So this is a common business thing that can happen in a new industry, is that too many players will try and jump in, and everybody hurts for a while until one power or two powers, in the ideal situation you want two, so you have some competition, will emerge, and then they can stabilize, because then all of the other little guys start to fall off, and then there ends up being enough of a pie for them to survive. So there's a minimum threshold of how much money that has to be made for a company to survive and do things at the scale they're doing.
Sure.
So I think there's just not enough money in it right now to support two, is where I think what's actually happened.
And in the case of Nexus, it's like when they started it wasn't like they had venture capital to start it. It was like it was a passion project, and it just kind of grew into what it is. So yeah, there's no market there where you could go and try to start a new one from scratch at that level with that kind of money and stuff. So again, this is huge props to Nexus for building it up into what it is and holding on to it and continuing to grow. So it's huge kudos to them. Again, I'm not trying to start any somebody should compete against Nexus.
Well, I mean, I bet
curious.
There are probably people who have been on the Nexus longer than us who know of some shadier things that have happened in the past, or maybe we don't know the whole story in that regard, and we're looking at them with reverence, but maybe they have their own issues. So yeah, I think in any industry, I would like to see at least two. I would like to have two or three choices. Once you get into these no choice, it does get then things can get suboptimal. And obviously, in something like Nexus, it's all free. There's nobody taking a loss here or being forced to purchase things at an exorbitant price or anything. So it's a different beast in that regard. But I still could see there are things I've criticized Nexus about in their site design on, for example, the bug reporting section. And I disable it for the most part. I've started doing that now because it's too difficult to manage. It's a clunky piece of software, I have certain issues in that regard. And then so there are things about the site I don't particularly like, that if a competitor was in there and then was offering those things, and that those were enough to pull me over to their site, then that might spur Nexus to improve them as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, competition's always good. Yeah, I just thought it was kind of an interesting. The thought crossed my mind because my initial thought was that because Nexus is the trusted place for mods that this mod pack, that they're the only place to do mod packs in a way that would work. Right. I just kind of had the counter thought like, why is that? Why isn't it? Why hasn't anybody else been able to do that successfully? But anyway.
Yeah. And maybe the move into mod packs will start to grow the modding scene enough to where then a competitor becomes realistic.
Yeah, it could be. And I think, again, it boils down to money. As much as people, some people anyway, don't like the idea of money being involved. Money's always involved. Money's involved in the Nexus right now because they have to run ads to make money to keep the site alive. So there is already money involved in modding. It's just not directly unless it's your eyeballs on ads as opposed to out of your pocket. It's like the YouTube model. So So yeah, that would be tough. Somebody would have to come up with a really comprehensive revenue model that didn't touch people's wallets,
Right. Not if somebody can solve that problem, like how can I make money out of thin air without people?
Yeah. Become the YouTube of mods somehow of advertising. I don't know. I don't even want to imagine.
So I'm looking forward to mod packs. I think they're a necessity. I hope they come up with a good solution to help out with that. I still think my biggest, I think the solving it for the individual creator of, there's a lot of things we can do there. The hot files thing, the sharing the donation points, making sure that they get credit as best as possible, and the opt-in. I think all of that's solvable. What I don't think that solves is the curation problem. I think that's a problem we have to solve in the digital age in general. The only thing I've thought of that might be able to deal with that would be random suggestions. So having it built into every platform that there was just like a randomized section in your face. Like, so for example, imagine at Nexus, if just below hot files, there was random selections you might enjoy, and it just threw 5 or 6 random mods at you just to see, as a chance, give those people a chance to show up. I think Twitch kind of does that. They will spotlight random creators occasionally, just as
I think they do. Yeah, I think there's a few ways that the algorithm. Again, this could go into a bigger conversation. And by the way, thank you for pulling the conversation back to the proper topic. We were kind of going off there. I can do that sometimes. I mean it's hard to solve, and people are obviously, between Facebook and everything else, they're actively trying to solve the algorithm, capital T, capital A, and trying to come up with better ways to serve people more content that they're interested in, et cetera, et cetera. I think, showing a big thing. One of the things at MySpace that I worked on was music upload and artist discovery. So there was the problem there, at least toward, when MySpace started to fall off anyway, that at that point, bands weren't being discovered the same way they were in the beginning. Like, the Killers and some of these, like She Wants Revenge and some of these other bands, they were like, they built their following up on MySpace. But by the time MySpace was a household name, you had, Jay-Z and Beyonce and all of them were also on MySpace. And so the MySpace music pages were all, top 40 artists and stuff, and everybody got drowned out. And so a big fight that I had, my personal kind of war internally, was to try to keep things focused on bubbling up new upcoming artists. And I mean, there was a million ways that we tried to solve that, and it was always difficult. But along those lines, some of the things that I think really help are, that randomization. I think things like contests are also really good, because you give people the incentive, instead of just, playing the lottery that they'll get randomly selected or displayed, that if you do kind of like a weekly or a monthly contest, that can get featured, like on the homepage or whatever, of, and maybe there's a voting system or something involved like that. Those kinds of things I think help, because then the people that are willing to put the initiative in, that really want to be discovered, can put something together. They can hold, like a voting, once a month voting thing. And this is off the top of my head, but some kind of a voting system.
I'm already liking that idea of the fact that then those people could put their effort in for that one moment. They get their shot. We got like Eminem style, just like, don't miss your chance to blow. And like they get to do it right then and pull it off. Like that sounds awesome. Like that could be really cool for any of these scenes, whether it be YouTube or music or mods, even. Of like, just imagine if like periodically Nexus hosted a virtual game jam where it was like, we're gonna feature these for a vote at the end of the month or something. Like that could be
like that would be really cool. Like I remember there was somebody did a competition with like Quest mods a couple of years ago for Skyrim. I don't remember if it was Nexus that officially held it or not.
I know
Details
that
are blurry.
didn't I think Nvidia or somebody did one recently?
Nvidia did one, but that one there was for Fallout 4. And the thing was, you could submit stuff that you already made, and I won one of the top spots because I threw in my ring into the hat with West Tech Tactical Optics, and it won like third place or something.
Nice.
So I was like, that was kind of weird because it already existed. I felt kind of crappy because I felt like I cheated. You know, I was like,
right. I guess.
There,
oh wait, I mean, it'd be pretty hard for them to prevent people from doing that. It's hard to
show
when you created the assets and.
Right. But, you know, and for them, it was just a marketing thing anyway, so they didn't really care that much. But Nexus could do it right. Like they could do kind of competition type things. And I think that's a good route. Because if they did like a mod pack theme thing too, where they're like, this month, the theme competition is going to be best mod pack for like a barbarian playthrough or something.
Oh yeah, that could be sweet.
Yeah. And then, you know, so then they've got, here's the 10 that were submitted, and you know, vote on it, and that, because then they're not getting drowned out by just, you know, super curator guy who's always making the cool things. You know, it just gives them another way. So my point with all that babbling is that there's multiple venues to bubble stuff up and bubble up related and interesting content and keep new people from feeling like they're left out. Because like I wouldn't dream of trying to start a YouTube channel now. You'd have to be so outrageous in order to get any.
Right.
It's just crazy, man. And that cascades to music and everything else. It's really hard to be seen and heard. So
yeah. Well, I think that's what drives a lot of the clickbaity stuff that's going on everywhere on every platform. Is that it's like it's hard to get heard, so you just say the most outrageous thing you can to get heard.
It sucks. So and solving that across all platforms, I mean, it's going to be hard, but if they do it, it'll help reduce clickbaity crap, you know.
Right.
In theory it would. So hopefully that would be the case. But anyway.
Yeah. I think that's like you said, it's opening up. We could go into a whole other conversation about that because it's so related to all forms of content distribution now, is that discovery is such a huge issue.
Yeah. Well, that's something, you know, bringing it, I think, all the way to our very first topic we were talking about during this call, is that, you know, modding is a relatively newish thing. I mean, you know, we had it all the way back to like the Quake games and stuff when people included their kits. And what'd you say? Was it Doom 3 that you said? Or
I was
Quake
really into Quake 3.
Into?
Yeah, but there's
Quake 3?
Modding was around well before that too. It was just that was what I happened to get into. Yeah.
But on the scale that it is now, I think it's still a frontier, is my point.
Right.
And it's interesting that some of the things that can be implemented and solved here can cascade to other industries. So just something to think about. We're definitely doing something interesting that a lot of people have yet to even consider. So it's pretty cool.
It is.
Modding is cool, guys.
It's also not, and this is the point I always want to make with each of these podcasts, is to say that any random skill you picked up somewhere in your life might be relevant to modding. So if you've wanted to create video games for a long time, which I think a lot of people who just play them a lot secretly, especially people who mod together games, Bethesda games, I think we've all had a little bit of secret passion to be like, man, I wish I could make a cool game. I think you all have it in you. And like, I think Fading and I are examples of that. Is like, we just happen to take our whatever random skills we had IRL and are like, let's throw them at this game engine and see what happens. And then it's just
absolutely, like, I very strongly encourage people to, you know, I see a lot of people asking, how can I start? How can I get into modding? How can I do this and that? Just start. I mean, if you don't, what am I trying to say? Basically, if you don't have to have every skill imaginable to get into modding and to make something, you know, if you're a good writer, people need good writers for mods. If you're just a texture artist, you know, you don't have to be a 3D artist and a scripter and a programmer to make a good mod. I mean, yeah, you can get those resources and pull them together. So yeah, definitely. I say I'm all for it. I think it's a really good experience.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I put in a million hours into this. But yeah, it's anyway. So I think that's an awesome place to stop. Fading, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's probably right around your dinner time, so I don't want to keep you up any longer.
No problem.
But, yeah, thanks again for taking the time and talking to me. And we can't wait to see what else you create. I know you have tons of stuff on your plate with the Creation Club stuff. But if you ever have time, we are all ready to download anything you throw up on the Nexus.
Great. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. This was a pleasure to talk about all this stuff. And yeah, I mean, I've only had time for small things, but I am not done modding. So you'll still keep seeing stuff from me here and there.
Fantastic. All right. Take care, buddy.
All right. Thanks. Take care.